Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto inherits the power of no-life king and monsters. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Long ago humans were cursed to live in fear every day with the ever-present threat of death, at the hands of another man or monster. Children are forced to live in a world without any hope of permanent safety or civilization for humans. Until one day, a woman from a foreign land came to the elemental nations and sought out the fruit of a divine tree called the Shinju. In a world of disorder, the only shared law was that consumption of the one fruit hanging from the Shinju's mighty limbs was forbidden. The woman's name was Kaguya Otsutsuki, and after she ate the fruit she used the power infused into her body by the fruit to end the wars plaguing the world with her godlike powers. Kaguya later had two sons who were born different from any other child at point. One had purple-ringed eyes, which was later dubbed the Rinnegan, that gave him access to several abilities his mother had, and he was named Hagoromo. While the other inherited his mother's snow-white eyes and equal power, and he was called Hamura. The boy had an iron hard will to never give up on his dream to help others and trained himself to the point that he could emulate his mother's unique abilities. He could control all the elements and create new ones, he could walk on water and heal others' grievous injuries, but his greatest power was the ability to inspire others and create much-needed unity. The man exterminated all the monsters with the aid of his two sons and their families. Until the day came when he and his brother faced the creature called the Jubi, 10-tailed demon. But even they, with all the power of the Rinnegan, couldn't slay the beast, so Hagoromo sealed it within himself and brought it to his homestead. There he ripped the soul of the beast from its body and separated it into 9 beings of unbelievable power. He named the beasts and allowed them to roam free as long as they swore to never harm humans without reason. Tired and exhausted, he used the last of his strength to hurl the corpse of the Jubi into the heavens and enclosed the great beast's body in stone until it stopped just outside the Earth's atmosphere. The structure later became known as the Moon. On his deathbed, he summoned his two sons to choose his successor. The younger son was blessed with his strong body and spirit, the older his powerful eyes and intellect. He asked his children, "If I entrusted you with my position, how would you lead our people?" The younger brother claimed he would lead his people with love and compassion so they would be willing to follow him, while the older claimed he would rule the people with power and force them to obey him. The dying man gave his blessing to his younger son and gave him the title of patriarch of their clan. Angered, the older son adopted the name Uchiha and swore vengeance on his brother and all his descendants for all eternity, while his brother took the name Senju and met his challenge head-on. The Senju became known for compassion, understanding, and willpower. The Uchiha were respected for their power, cruelty, and their relentless tenacity in battle. Eventually, the Senju had another more hospitable split in the bloodline, causing another clan called the Uzumaki to be born. Years upon years passed, and while technology, leaders, and civilizations changed, those behind the change were always the same. It always started with an Uchiha and a Senju. Nothing changed. The history of man always has involved hate and love, which would cause even more hate. But one generation something changed. An Uzumaki and an Uchiha, enemies by blood, fell in love, got married and had children. The lovers' names were Miso Uzumaki and Yuko Uchiha. Their children were named Shio, Kirisuto, Maizuru, and Hanten. Their story of love, happiness and determination would make a fine story, but sadly every case of true love doesn't end with a happily ever after. This story does show the power of will and the strength that loved ones can show to each other, but it also shows one other trait that all of humanity displays often: our ability to make each other suffer. Land of Waves 13-2E, the 13th year of the reign of the second emperor. It was an everyday boring day for Tadaki Ryoka, the commander of the Akatsuki remnant outpost located in the Land of Waves. Ryoka was also annoyed. Ever since he was given a field promotion to Jonin, he was ecstatic to get a leading position of an outpost in a country bordering the heart of the Elemental Empire. After being dominated by the Big Five nations for centuries, the minor countries of the Elemental nations were sick of their position and band together with an Akatsuki-occupied land of water. Having been born and raised on a poor farm in the Land of Rivers, he came to the Land of Waves often to gather supplies with his father before he was murdered by accident in a village revolt. "I came here thinking I would be able to avenge his death, yet besides overseeing the transformation of this base from a bunch of tents into a fortress, I've done nothing. Ryoka stared at the wall directly south of his office through a reinforced window. I feel like I won't get the chance, he said to himself before shaking his head clear of the thoughts, filling his head with thoughts of bravado and glory instead. Meanwhile, 8 figures covered with black cloaks and adorned in porcelain white masks stood by a huge wall of the fortress. One silhouette, with a mask, adorned with turquoise stripes and the kanji for the number 1, stepped forward and raised 3 fingers followed by 5, then pumped a fist. 2 silhouettes stepped out of formation and withdrew 2 separate objects from within their pitch-black garb. One held a matte gray lusterless metal can which was promptly ripped open before the holder molded the onyx dough-like material within into a sphere which was pressed onto the wall. The other silhouette, wearing a mask with 2 horns on either cheekbone and the kanji for 8 over the mouth area, withdrew a small 2-inch metal bolt with a minuscule hole facing the shadows and placed it into the substance. The last stray silhouette returned to formation, then one raised an outstretched hand, causing a stream of sand to cascade in the air towards the hole after escaping the brown cylinder-shaped pouch on her belt. She snapped her fingers and momentarily the telltale sound of grinding metal reverberated in the air before the roar of an explosion dominated the area. Ryoka was forced out of his premonition of failure by the sound of an explosion from the southmost wall, directly parallel to his office. While most of his fellow officers most likely panicked upon seeing this, Ryoka grinned. The chance of fulfilling his thirst for vengeance outweighing the thought of his troops' safety. Ryoka bolted toward the code-locked officer's standard-issue armament locker seeking out his body armor, more .45 rounds for his revolver, kunai, and a couple of explosive tags. A run-of-the-mill grunt burst through the door and kneeled quickly. Has the explosive specialist been able to identify the mystery device? Ryoka said as he double-checked that his revolver was loaded as he barked orders to the grunt. No sir, he was killed in the explosion. The fragmentation got to him before the medics could heal him enough to talk. The grunt said as he scratched at the navy face mask concealing all, but his downcast, somewhat unnaturally black eyes. Damn shame, Ryoka said in a voice laced with a large amount of apathy. The grunt glared at him. The sorrow you feel for the fallen is most inspiring, Ryoka Taiko. The grunt replied in a harsh voice with a sarcastic edge. Ryoka turned and glared hard at the grunt. Mind your tongue, boy. What did the strategist guess their next move would be? He demanded as he flicked his wrist, causing the cylinder of the revolver to fall back into place with a quiet click. The foot soldier looked the ground, avoiding his glance as if he had problems speaking. Ryoka pushed aside the desire to call this troop a freak and motioned to continue with his handgun. Infiltrate the ranks, assassinate high-ranking officers to lower morale and mess with the cohesion among the lower ranks. Ryoka raised an eyebrow as he stated, that's weird. The grunt's gaze adopted a curious glint. What is abnormal, sir? The soldier asked. Ryoka turned his back to the grunt to observe a layout of the base. That fool has never assessed a situation this well, he muttered before motioning for the grunt to move along. Instead, the grunt rose to full height and withdrew a revolver of his own from within his cloak, his hand kissing a white material stained with the blood-red kanji for 9. Momentarily. That's because your strategist didn't, Tadaki Ryoka. 9 stated, slapping the hammer of the gun and shooting quickly from the hip. The Akatsuki separatist leader of the Waves outpost slumped over his desk with a hole gaping where the base of his skull once was. I hopped out a window by the north wall, now wearing my mask and using my throat mic to inform my superior of my success. Kite to Eagle, do you copy, over? I asked observing the horizon for targets. I hear ya, Kite, did you complete your objective? Eagle said before pausing to drink something from a can loudly, causing me to grit my teeth. Yes Eagle. Ryoka is dead and his corpse will be taken care of, I said before scoffing. Meanwhile the activated explosive tags that blanketed the inner pockets of the late Tadaki Ryoka ignited and seconds later exploded, killing multiple people, both military and civilian. Back with the birds, good to see you're not completely useless. Come to HQ while your Ni-sama gets ready to move out and finish off the base solo like the legend he is. Eagle said with an egotistical hum reverberating throughout his voice. Legend my ass. You were afraid of the loud toilets until you were like 13. Also, you totally just revealed personal info over an insecure channel, dumbass. I said resisting the urge to facepalm. Well, at least I can do Rasengan without Cage Bunshin. He said haughtily. At least I didn't believe that belly button lint was actually eggs to a bug that will burrow into your stomach and eat you if you didn't clean it out every once in a while, I mumbled, causing my Ni-sama to gasp. I trusted you, he started before I cut him off briskly. More like you were so mentally challenged to also think that dogs can't look up, I replied as I could our base camp a few chakra-enhanced jumps away. They can't though, he stated as if it were a fact to my displeasure. Fucking. I said through grit teeth as I arrived at base camp, yelling at my older brother as soon as my feet touched ground. After nearly 2 straight minutes of trading vocal blows, I coughed to get my brother to stop. He popped his neck, trying to act cool, and craned his head towards the others. Let's continue this some other time, she before the others ride my ass for actually speaking moan to mommy and daddy about the scary Uchiha. I stated with disdain at people referring to me with my mother's family name, as Shio merely grinned cheekily while my team bore holes into me. Wouldn't be the first time some of these brats moaned because of an Uzumaki. Nudge nudge, my brother said with a Cheshire grin. I giggled ferociously as a certain prime number got kinda pissy. The leader of our team, with a mask emblazoned with the number 1, stepped forward adjusting her cloak and spoke in an annoyingly monotone voice. Shouldn't you go do your job so we can get out of here? Sleeping near your smelly ass is terrible for the soul and body. Plus, since your Aniki is here, you are getting quite presumptuous. To be honest, it's annoying. You are much better when you shut up and sulk in the corner where you belong. She ordered. Shut your mouth, woman, or you'll choke on blood. My brother growled through grit teeth and his Sharingan ablaze, causing her to look down but kept her bitchiness. I don't discourage bloodshed at all, Shio-kun. I scoffed and whispered loud enough for our teammates to hear as well as my brother. At least it means you aren't pregnant, but with your lifestyle you might have to watch out for an overdose. That's a lot of pills just to prevent another one of you to walk around. I said in as flat a tone as one. My brother burst out laughing as one bolted towards me, only to meet a solid wall of wood that rose 9 feet high as my brother's laughter died down. This was fun, but we must get going. If you 8 are as easily irritable as your leader, I'd rather not let you watch my back. No offense, but you root members are strategically inferior to the Anbu on many levels. You make up for it with stopping power, but this mission requires power and precision to finish off the base. So clean up here and pack up camp or something. Kirisuto and I can handle it. My brother explained in his I'm a kind Ni-san voice, causing all the members' protests to die down, excluding one. Not wanting to overstep my boundaries, I cleared my throat. Actually, I suggest bringing Natsumi and Tsukiko, I mean 7 and 10. I started stumbling with my words since I'm not used to talking in front of others, especially when I'm arguing for them. They host the Nanabi and Ajubi fragment. They also have excellent chakra control and are on a first-name basis with their Biju. I continued as my brother grew an amused grin, causing me to frown, scared about what was going on in that warped, empty-ass head of his. Okay. I'll let your girl FR. Kidding. Very well, they can come, but you 3 must use your telepathy to remain in touch to synchronize your attacks. My brother responded, thankfully bringing my embarrassment to a minimum before jumping to the trees and getting a head start. I motioned for my 2 fellow Jinchuriki to follow me. They stepped forward, remaining silent as I usually am, hence why the others called us 3 the emo trios of our group. I personally find this creative name a thrilling example of the average Imperial's intelligence. We turned, and at the last possible second I looked over my shoulder at my leader and bowed my head slightly. I apologize for my irregular behavior. I honestly do act different around my family. I promise I'll try to get him to behave from here on out. I dislike upsetting you. I'm also sorry for insulting you, I said before I pumped chakra into my legs and jumped onto a nearby tall tree before pursuing my brother with 7 and 10 in tow. The remaining soldiers went back to their duties at one's orders and then began to pace around camp angrily. Who does that mongrel think he is? Calling me inferior and 9. He is better when he's quiet. Though, I like the way he sounds when he shows humility. I want to hear him squeal. Anyway, only one more day and I'll get to help myself to plenty of that, she thought to herself as she made her way to her tent. A few days later, Konohagakure district. After a particularly uneventful but amusing trip back to the Konoha district of the Empire following the success of the mission, I walked toward the Emperor's palace with Shio in tow. For such loyal dogs, they're quick to avoid their master's orders when they have to travel with wolves, right brother? I mumbled, fidgeting with the ninjutsu slung across my shoulders. Don't be rude, Kiri. My brother chided me before continuing. We like dogs, so don't compare them to such sad, pathetic creatures. I grinned but shook my head to the negative as I thought to myself. My face hurts. Has it really been so long since I smiled so much? I shook my head slightly as I dismissed the thought and then turned to my brother, saying in a corrective tone. Snakes and foxes are way better though. My brother shrugged. Well, when you're stuck from an avalanche, I'm going to laugh my ass off when a little fox is carrying a tub of brandy bigger than itself to your whiskered ass. I laughed. It must have been a year or two since we were on a mission together. We don't talk much because of that. Sometimes I regret joining the route as opposed to the Anbu. A team only of Jinchuriki, people who understand you. Bullshit. Team Nakama is full of assholes while Nissan's Team Ember has tons of family friends. Hitaki-chan, Mitarashi and Daisuke are on there too. I thought to myself before my brother popped me on the stomach with the end of his soda bottle. I know why you're upset, my brother said with a smile on his face. You do? I said with a raised eyebrow. Yep. You like Nanami and Tsukiko, right? That's so. Phew, hhhh. My brother started before he was silenced from a well-placed punch to the diaphragm. I then looked around to see if anyone heard my brother's heresy, and my eyes quickly came upon an unfortunately close group of teenagers bearing the Haruno clan insignia who looked at me with a combination of hatred and mirth. The hatred I was used to, but the mirth, well, I did my best to deal with it. Lies. He's drunk, I swear. I've never even talked to them until like a year ago. We're just teammates, Ibeo. I yelled before covering my mouth, annoyed at my slip of the tongue and my cracking voice. Why'd my voice have to crack now? If there is a god, I hope he is a he, because if not, my stupid ass is screwed. Must be quite the humorous bastard. I screeched to myself mentally. The lead girl, who seemed to cover her face with a plastic bag before putting on her makeup with her pink hair adorned with blonde highlights, cooed, "Aw. The way you turn red is almost, well, cute, if you weren't a baby killer, of course." The leader of the Gongoro skanks exclaimed, obviously one those anti-war bitches who like to insult me for doing something about idiots who'd rather live in a giant dream than face real life with some testicles. Holy shit, it's trying to be intelligent, even with all those chemicals seeping into its scalp and overabundance of oxygen due to their unbelievable small chests. I said as I lead my gasping brother to the Emperor's compound. Savoring the indignant screams all along the way. After stepping out of the main office of the compound, Shio sighed. Of course the shitlord wouldn't be here. My brother muttered under his breath as we left the office of the compound, while I made sure to sneak in a middle finger directed toward the bigot of a secretary as we left. My brother noticed. What did she do exactly? He said, referring to the late 20-something red-headed woman. Remember how I let you sit and rest while I went to ask if the Emperor was available? I started with an expression reeking of distaste. This didn't help my reasoning for being antisocial at all. Yeah, you took like 10 minutes, he responded with a confused expression. Well, that waste of 9 months decided to get me to show my ID, my forehead protector, and did a blood seal test for the validity of my root membership. 3 times. I swear the bitch must be into femdom or something. I said emphatically. My brother made an expression of realization, then turned and flipped the secretary off as well. Sounds like my ex, he exclaimed with a pouting face. I wouldn't know. Anyway, she said he was going to speak with the Hyuga head, and since it's so close to home, I can go and give our report while you go. Do whatever romantic shit you do with Kanade that you always do. I said, rubbing the lining of my mask. Shio stopped me with a hand on the shoulder at the intersection between the Hyuga district, the road leading to downtown, the path to the Emperor's compound, and the original exit of the village. While I am thankful for being bought time for loving, you must understand that any act of love your Aniki dishes out is 1 in a million. My brother said, accentuating said notion with a thumbs up and a sparkly smile. I know. Love is better than war, yada yada yada. Yano, I think it's all horseshit, but please, if I agree, will you stop talking like Lee-sensei from my team 13 days? I asked. My brother nodded and bolted towards his girlfriend's apartment, yelling thank you over his shoulder. I smiled softly, then touched a seal on my right wrist that was kanji for black. In a puff of smoke, a solid black fox the size of a puppy appeared and hopped on my shoulder and unintentionally mimicked a scarf with a yip. I missed you too, Miso. Let's go look for the Emperor together, okay? I said in a voice resembling one said to a baby as I pushed the canine's lower jaw up, causing him to crane his head up. Much to the disgust and unintentional amusement to some of those in the crowd close enough in proximity to hear me. 18 may be a bit too old to talk to your pet like that, but I don't give a fuck. Miso can kick ass and be adorable simultaneously. He is a boss. I thought as I practically marched toward the Emperor's last known whereabouts. While thinking of how bomb-ass my fox was, I unintentionally bumbled into someone at the entrance to the Hyuga district. Sorry, are you okay? I mumbled out with a stutter and a crimson face. I am not easily embarrassed, but when I am I always react like an idiot. Also, I just happened to have bumped into the Emperor, who isn't very fond of me on a regular day, particularly when I tackle him. Dear God, I hate being in public so much. Well, this is fantastic. I mumbled in my head only to get my demons, Kurama the nine-tailed fox, laughter in response. The Emperor stated he was on his way to talk to the Uzumaki clan head for the monthly report, so I offered to lead him to my house to talk to my mom since my aunt was away on a mission along with my uncle. He nodded and wordlessly followed me home as I gave my report regarding the Waves outpost, more specifically detailing the destruction my brother and I caused with our Mokuton, wood style, and Hayatan, ice style, Kekai Genkai, bloodline limit, abilities respectively. When we arrived at my house, my mother let us in and asked if we wanted to have some tea. Well, actually she didn't ask me because tea tastes terrible to me, so I grabbed some cola from the refrigerator. Shimura sat on his knees by the small table covered with 2 cups of tea and a cola, in the rather large living room of the building. I sat on the nearby couch with my mother eating a half-eaten sandwich that I had began devouring like 3 days ago. Don't you wonder why I'm single? He shifted the eternally present hood he wore, only revealing his jawline from the bottom of his nose to an apparently more comfortable position. He drank his tea slowly, then looked at the onyx-eyed people before him with a gray-colored iris that his hood had shifted to reveal. I have considerable reason to believe there may be a turncoat in the village who could become a substantial threat. My eyes widened in surprise. I don't recall there being a traitor from Konohagakure since before the formation of the empire. If my memory from school rings true, the last was during the reign of the 5th Hokage, when we still had cages. However, my mother merely put a hand on my shoulder and continued to keep her narrowing eyes on the Emperor. He slurped his tea loudly, then continued. I am aware that the general population of the Konoha district is particularly hostile towards those relating to your bloodline, your sister-in-law and her family included, Uzumaki. The traitor seems to harbor a strong hatred of your family, and his only motive is your utter extermination to ease his desire for vengeance. The Emperor said as his tan hands started to subconsciously tighten and crack the teacup. I remained seated with a grimace. So did you tell the Hyuga this as well? Or did you really take their report? Is asked before blushing at my inability to read the mood. My mother merely shook her head with a smile at my random burst of hyperactivity that the Uzumaki are known for. Shimura frowned and said in a stern, commanding tone. No. They received similar information. You will not pursue this target in any way, Raven. You are a Jinchuriki and a superb root member, hence, you are an effective tool of the Empire that can't be used to slaughter any old pig that stumbles to our door. Acts of recklessness such as this is exactly what caused your father's death. I frowned and merely sighed in exasperation. Shimura drew a wakizashi, that was immediately cloaked in sickly yellow wind chakra, swinging in a diagonal arc towards my shoulder. I met the challenging blade with my pitch-black ninjutsu, cloaked in my own amber wind chakra. Our blades created loud cracks of escaping pressure to pound our ears as we fought for dominance. My mother surrounded Shimura's back and neck with more razor-sharp icicles than I could count in seconds before stepping before I and declared in a voice that exhibited finality. You are leaving, Shimura-san, and you will never speak to any of my children without my attendance for here on out. Kirisuto, you will go to your room and rest. I nodded and turned to leave as Shimura pleaded as he was being led out. Forgive em. My mother held up her hand and silenced the man standing in the doorway. She sighed and rubbed her eyes before starting to speak. I lost my husband years ago, my parents as a teen, and have had little to no contact with others on a monthly basis, so forgive me if my communication skills are rusty. But if you ever threaten any of my family again, especially in front of me. I will kill you where you stand. I won't challenge you a duel, or fight. I will simply slaughter you like a dog before you can even comprehend my actions. Good night, Shimura-san, was what my mother said. I avoided radiating with barely reined in hatred. I snickered as I walked to my room, unaware of the dire events that had occurred tonight. I woke up in the middle of the night, again with a shudder, thinking I saw something for a second. Ever since I joined the route, I tend to end up sleeping during the day most of the time when I come back home. I can't trust my friends to not pull a silver blade out on me while I sleep, since some of them always are up to impressing one. Tsukiko and Natsumi aren't particularly close to me either, but they won't hurt me. I am not being paranoid. I have many scars that say otherwise from my days at command on the front lines. I blew air through my nostrils, trying to clear out the dust and feed more anger to my thought train. They're also keen on informing her about how my decisions on the field are morally inappropriate. Only a fool puts morals before actions in such minuscule conflicts as these. Rebellion my ass, all I see are a bunch of losers that are too cowardly to live in reality. My thoughts were interrupted as I suddenly stared at the black wet nose that appeared in front of me move closer as its owner observed me with excitement. I pushed myself upright lazily with one arm to make room for Miso. The fox had decided to expand in size to that of a fully grown Labrador as he lay on his back, with his snout resting on my leg. Better, I whispered before Miso uttered a hushed yip. I smiled before licking my dry lips. But of course. I responded then as I began to rub my eyes whilst I sat in the center of the bed leaning against my wall. My head craned to stare out my skylight, at the stars jumping to erratic positions from the raindrops pounding at the glass. I was tired. Tired of living in a place where everyday kids are trained to kill and people openly embrace our instinctive hatred, lust and greed like animals. While the people like me who actually think for a second that there is more to us than fucking and kicking a ball around are seen as dangerous or paranoid. I know while the Konoha region of the Empire was never really accepting of different people, even before the Empire's existence, I've never been in such a passive-aggressive place in my life. I hate to admit it, but I was sort of relieved to discover I had a condition that made me dislike being around others. It made me think I wasn't insane, though I don't believe for a second I was born like this. Born hating that I have to live but too afraid to die, that wasn't me. I can't accept that I was given birth to by my mother like this. They made this thing I am now, this person, that'd rather be in a cell than a crowd. I hate people so much. I hate walking anywhere. I feel eyes that aren't there, judging and criticizing me. I feel that I have to tug on my clothing and fix the faults that aren't there. I try to fix what's under the skin. I detest the way they lie, cheat, steal or even love. It makes me angry because I can't do nothing but hate. A Uchiha can only hate, and that's what was thrust upon me to be. An Uchiha. My mother is the kindest person I've ever met, and just not to me but still even after Dad. They still treat her like shit. Because of what some old fucks did so long ago. I was molded by those bastards to hate. No, I don't hate people, or love them, or fear them. I don't care about them, and that feels so much worse. The only things that pull me away from being a mindless beast are my family's bonds of love. And the Emperor's fucking leash. All our pain originated because of ignorance, complete utter ignorance and stupidity. The late hero of Konoha was renowned for his control over his tailed beast and being the strongest Jinchuriki since the Sage of the Six Paths. But as to be expected, it wasn't always like that. Orphaned at birth, kicked out of the orphanage at age 5, he lived alone until he got married in his 20s. How fucking surprising. Here in Konoha, at an early age the aging third Hokage gave him an apartment of his own, left him a monthly allowance and let the kid do whatever he wanted. Which wouldn't have been that bad if Konoha wasn't a shithole. Very few stores allowed him entry and all but one overcharged him severely. Not a very fair deal, as he was barely older than a toddler and financial responsibility was lost on him. They were never able to beat him physically, but being denied existence as a human and seeing those eyes full of hate every day without stop for 12 years. I couldn't handle that, not alone. I would have gone insane and killed someone. Or myself, I just know it. Hey, not exactly the greatest thoughts to have to coax myself into going to sleep, huh? I said to myself as I ran my hand through my hair. I then traced my jawline, feeling the stubble growing as I stared up at the moon through the skylight, groaning when I felt the familiar feeling of bruises lining the dominant hand I use when using a sword. Shimura has skill, there is no doubt about that. Still, no matter how difficult this gets, my father bought me this second chance. I won't let him down, I said to Miso. He seemed to give me the canine equivalent to a smile. I looked down at the cyan green crystal lying hanging over my chest, waiting for the relief it seemed to give me ever since I first received the Kyubi. Chidori. Suddenly my mother's voice rebounded down the hallway, suddenly causing me to wake up completely. My eyes widened, activating my Sharingan before I shot chakra to my feet as I jumped up, sticking to and running along the ceiling to my mother's room in one primal leap. As I bounced to the wall parallel of my room's doorway and ran down the hallway. As I made my way to my mom's room, my eyes met my mother's form. I saw her with her arm cloaked in lightning and buried in a man's chest. She also had her Chikudo, straight sword that grandfather had given her, drawn in a reverse grip behind her, parrying a kunai-wielding kunoichi. I immediately pointed at a third attacker guarding the door and watched Miso stalk up behind the assassin at full speed. I inhaled deeply, directing wind chakra towards my lungs as I nodded and attacked simultaneously with Miso. I could almost make out the sound of the man hitting the floor and the screaming as Miso tore at his throat as I shouted, "Wind style, air bullet." Causing a burst of concentrated air to shoot from my mouth, the pressurized air rammed the knife-wielding assailant in the chest, splattering gore on the wall behind her and ensuring my mother's safety for the moment. He's not getting back up for sure, I thought with a tinge of dark humor, until a particularly gross squelch from Misa's efforts startled me. Sensing a large chakra signature approaching, I flared my chakra to alert any nearby Anbu or siblings. I rushed to the main entrance with my ninjutsu at the ready after telling Miso to watch mom and sniff for more assassins, only to discover Emperor Shimura. "We need your help. We were attacked. May have been the traitors you mentioned earlier. They were too organized to be remnant," I said while using some ice chakra to freeze the blood on the outside of my mom's cut, to staunch the bleeding from a wound on my mother's side. Shimura rushed forward suddenly but stopped to parry Shio's ninjutsu, fighting to reach his throat. My brother pivoted with his sword to prepare for an overhead slice to Shimura's shoulder blade. When Shimura dodged backwards and caught the blade, his armored glove stopped the blade immediately and he countered with a jutsu of his own. "Chidori," he uttered as he slammed his own lightning blade through the sword and penetrated my brother's forearm. I pounced to my brother's side, grabbed the grown man's throat and choke-slammed him hard enough to dislocate his shoulder with a snap. As his lightning blade dissipated, my brother stomped on his chest, causing us to discover he was a mere shadow clone. We turned and saw our mother collapsed with two silhouettes hovering over her. I also saw Miso fighting two huge brown dogs in the hallway corner we ran out from. In anger, my brother inhaled and yelled, "Fire style, running fire." A ring of fire burst into existence and surrounded the pair of enemy ninja. I brought my hands together and formed the ram hand seal and exhaled towards the flames, "Wind style, divine wind." The flames skyrocketed and the pair had to get closer to the center to avoid being burned. With the assailants taken care of, I sprinted forward and grabbed my mother as well as drawing my revolver in one swift motion. I fired 2 shots immediately, thankful that I was carrying a double-action model that didn't require me to cock the hammer after every shot, scoring 2 headshots. Satisfied with my results, I promptly activated my shunshin and disappeared in a flurry of leaves. We reappeared on the roof of the hospital. As soon as my feet hit the concrete, I pressed a seal under my wrist, summoning Miso in a puff of smoke with blood covering his snout and 4 paws. My brother arrived right after from within the earth, surrounded my vines. I activated the only healing jutsu I knew and with Shio's help began to heal our mother. My eyes began to water and burn. My mother wasn't breathing as much anymore and the bleeding wouldn't stop. I checked her for any signs of life once more when she suddenly grabbed my hand and spoke softly, "Shio, you must find the twins and you better be prepared. I can't tell you what you'll see." My brother grimaced, then tightened his grip on his kunai before asking me for a firearm. I tossed him my snub-nosed small black revolver. "Holds 5. 22 rounds. I don't have any more on me. I was sleeping after all," I said, trying to fight back tears. "I can go in a moment. I'll send clones for now," he said seriously as 5 copies of him appeared in a burst of smoke and disappeared. My mother pulled me into her chest. "Shio, Kiri, I want to say that everything will be all right and you won't be hurt again, but I can't guarantee that. I can't protect you from the world even though I'd give anything to." I was weakened. Now I have to pay the consequences. You four are the best things that ever happened to me. I've never cared for anything like I do for you. I don't want to leave you alone. She said softly. My chest started to hurt. You must rest, Mom, don't spia, I started. I can't rest anymore. All of you must try to find someone who will be able to care about you like your father did for me. Someone who can see something in your eyes besides darkness. Someone who just makes you happy even when they don't try to. I also want you to beat these frumpy pieces of shit and show them what a real shinobi can do. What an Uzumaki can do. She continued, causing me to give in and nod with my face tense. I felt my mother's eyes burn with intensity as Miso darted to my side and rested his head against my thigh, trying to comfort me for the coming storm. Damn, Fox always did seem to read people quicker than I did. Shio was beside me, doing his best to shield my mother's body from the rain with his own. Do you remember the wall in the Uchiha hideout that you two would always play by with your toy guns in when you were little? We nodded. There is a last resort method for the clan's survival that was designed in the days of the first Hokage's reign. If you search behind the sage's monument, there will be a hidden room, and if you offer your blood, a seal will. Well, I don't know exactly, but it's supposed to help you get strong enough to protect what's important. That's all I want, my mother explained as she coughed violently, blood pouring from her wound. I sat there full of hatred directed at myself for being powerless to help my own mother. Find something worthy of protection, boys, and be sure to take care of your little brother and sister. They love you very much. And so do I. My mother fell silent. My eyes widened as the sky went silent as a lightning strike lit up the night. Mother. I shifted her torso slightly. Mom. My brother exclaimed as I let out silent crimson tears, shaking my mother to no avail. Mama. I cried out. No, no, yelled my brother and I simultaneously. I grabbed my mother's sword, throwing my ninjutsu to my brother for him to hold in his other hand as we darted to the most populated part of Konoha, towards Shimura's house. I won't be the only one to lose a family member tonight. I swear on my mother and father. I screamed in my head as I felt the Kyuubi's chakra go wild from my anger, gaining 7 tails and giving my brother 2 subconsciously. I could tell Kurama was angry as well. I bolted towards the Emperor's private residence, ignoring the sensation of my skin peeling away. I ran up to the entrance, kicked the door in and impaled the attendant through her eye socket without hesitation or thought, but my eyes never left the door ahead of us. I ran throughout the complex, breaking everything in my way and smashing furniture every time I was met with an empty room, never paying heed to the lack of guards like an idiot. I entered the last unexplored room and was met with a room full of seals. I felt the familiar burning of silver meeting my flesh and I lost consciousness. I sometimes wish I never woke up. A week later, bleeding heavily from my tree root-stitched abdomen, the Kyuubi berated me for my foolishness as I was being paraded through the city for a public execution since I survived in the cave, my hands bound and bleeding heavily from my throat and chest. Crimson tears fell from my eyes. While I was proud of myself for my perseverance, Kurama was worried because while their torture damaged me, the lengths I met to survive were far more taxing, to say the least. The 9 tails usually took care of any wound, but like everything else, Shimura saw to that. I wouldn't heal from these scars. I looked disgusting, like my skin had been chipped at carefully with an artisan's chisel. But the worst part was that these eternal marks weren't random scratches, they were warnings and labels written by my tormentors. Written in all the languages spoken was a warning to fear this demon if discovered in my weakness, such as silver or electricity. I stared at the sky, wondering why these monsters around me get to live happily, lying to themselves that they are good people while I get nothing but pain. Because they don't have a mind of their own or the will to think like we do. They live focused on one useless thing after another until a foolish mistake, disease or time kills them, and then they disappear in obscurity. With their lives as pathetically small and lacking of meaning as their meager brains. Kurama exclaimed in a voice radiating with hatred. I raised my head, acknowledging the fox's wise words. He doesn't want a single person who can stop what he has put in motion to even realize that he's done anything wrong. Kurisuto, have you noticed that you've seen none of Team Nakama since you returned? Are your aunt, your uncle, your cousin or the twins? All our allies are missing, with only our enemies remaining. My jaw tightened even more as I looked around before seeing 9 figures lifting a corpse for me to see. I roared in anger at the sight of my mother's corpse being strung up naked and bloodied. I lost it, you fuckers. I trusted you and you treat her like this. We served you trash and protected you from harm over and over again, yet you treat my mother, a war veteran, like this. I will kill you. I will kill all of you in your sleep, in your schools, even in your house of your god. I will slaughter you like rabid dogs. I screamed so hard my voice cracked and I hung my head praying for an answer. To finally be seen as life form worthy of a response besides those damning eyes. Those terrible, judgmental eyes. It came in the form of a man I saw only once long ago. He came close, his breath stained with alcohol. You're all monsters. Especially you. You're born so you can kill each other like animals, begging for more power at our expense. I trembled with fear under his gaze. This was the man who caused for the fox to be given to me. Why I was hated even more than when I was younger. Why the twins never got to know our father. Why couldn't you have died with your parents? I'm sick of seeing your sickening black ugly eyes, we all are. You are disgusting. I trembled for a split second, fighting away tears before I reached up and sank my teeth into his gnarled throat. Causing the man screeched like a pig, only to be silenced when hundreds of shards of frozen blood shot out of the back of his neck. My handlers rushed to finish me, but I placed a hand on the pig's corpse and his blood erupted from his body and towards them as a liquid before freeing, turning into a rain of needles, slicing into my handlers' bodies. I ripped the silver bindings from my arms and threw the fat fuck into the crowd of dogs, getting a satisfyingly pathetic wail of terror in response. The crowd's gaze met my now crimson, slitted eyes, accentuated by the numerous bloody scars lining my face. I slashed at the air with my clawed hands and violent gusts of pressurized air sailed through the crowd, killing dozens and causing the rest to flee. The gender and age of those slaughtered were of no concern to me. They are all nothing but wastes of life that provided nothing to the world but arrogance and noise. I then quickly turned to the instigators of my blood rage and stared at the 9 figures before me as a river of blood rushed toward me, carrying their lifeless containers in their torrents. They made us. One started before I burst forward and lifted her and ate by the skull while my red river surrounded the rest of the group. I wanted to fit in with you, so I did everything you asked. I even held back so we were on equal, and all I got was insults and names and your damning, disgusting, putrid blue eyes bearing into me, to me. Every time you paraded your lack of decency, attachment or even awareness, I wanted to kill you. I hated how much you were fine with being a dirty slut. You liked being an emotionless whore and I hated that so much. But I still stayed silent. I exclaimed as I activated the proof of the severity of my pain, my Mangekyo Sharingan. A red diamond surrounded by angular forms floated over blackness. A black slitted iris stationed in the middle of the diamond bore into my teammate's soul. You caused so much pain, so much sadness to my family, and then act like a bitch asking for mercy. You lack the dignity to die accepting your actions. I'm done, I said with a wavering voice, dropping the pair to their knees as I felt tears sting my eyes once more. The bitches looked up at me surprised. I'm done with people, I said before staring at 8 while willing for the blood to capture the other. The river split off and formed a serpentine creature made of frozen blood before constricting one. My left eye closed, trembling in pain. All of the causes of my pain, sadness and hate flooded the left side of my vision. So much emotion made me unaware of the burning sensation or the blood pooling from my tear ducts. Amaterasu, I uttered before the teen screeched as the flames of hell eagerly surrounded their newest soon-to-be occupant, giving me a sense of peace. Stop 9. I turned to meet my team leader as I disengaged my Mangekyo and sneered as the tomo in my iris returned to spin in my pupil at a furious pace. How much did they pay you? I said, shaking in anger. The way this monster faked sympathy sickened me to the core. We really didn't want to, she begged, fighting to free herself from the frozen bodily fluids. Shut the fuck up. You haven't felt sorry for anything in your life. She smirked, then giggled and finally laughed. I did it for free. Shimura-sama agreed to let me get closer to Daisuke in exchange for my loyalty, she said as she made progress at escaping and cracked the icicles somewhat. I gripped my own scalp so hard in anger with my nails that it shed blood as I cover my face, trying to absorb the selfishness and inhumane this cunt was. Then that's a damn shame, I muttered as she squinted in confusion. I will ensure you will die as sad and alone as my mother did, I stated as my frown became an expressionless line as I raised a loose fist. Constrict, frostbite. I said with more confidence than at any other time in my life. I knew with every fiber of my being that my actions were just. I cherished the expression of horror that crossed the slut's face when she discovered that the blood construct was sentient, it was alive in a way. Frostbite's jagged underbelly dug into her flesh, rending it apart. She started to shiver and her pale skin turned blue over the minutes as I stared into her eyes, pushing all the pent of anger I felt Rom being ignored and hated into the open. I showed her what it felt like to be seen as less than human, and I loved every moment of it. After several moments of satisfaction, I said the next part of the process. Kill her, I uttered, and as my brain sent signals through my nervous system directing my hand to clench into a fist, they were overwhelmed by the sensation of an unnatural amount of heat covering my head and upper torso, obscuring my vision, before receiving an uppercut to the chin knocking me backwards. Lava style. Magma boarding. Was all I heard before the lava burned my ears. I immediately exerted wind chakra in every direction to stun my attacker and then formed ice between my flesh and what lava remained. After my wounded flesh was encased, I used Shunshin to appear on a nearby rooftop. I bit my bottom lip to force myself not to scream as the Kyuubi sent his chakra throughout my body to heal. I helped sped up the process with a basic healing ninjutsu. I wanted to flare as much chakra as possible and heal immediately, but my attacker was still around, so I suppressed my chakra levels to remain discreet. I even resorted to lying prone in the depression where two buildings' rooftops met. My flesh was healed in a few minutes, but the burns from the branding irons stayed, lighter but still legible. After taking a deep breath and checking to make sure I was maintaining a stable flow of chakra for my Sharingan, I had prepared ice chakra to counter the lava and leapt from hiding. My eyes scanned my surroundings, looking for any signs of hostiles. I heard the sound of an aluminum can being crushed and felt heat approaching. I pivoted, creating an indefinite yet large round of sleet and covered my opponent's outstretched, sand spear-covered arm with sleet, then dealt a powerful palm strike to the chin. As one collapsed to the ground, my eyes remained fixed on my next opponent with a stern expression matched only by said opponent. Our eyes locked as I rose to my full height. History repeated itself as the Sharingan met the Rinnegan in battle. Was killing 4 family members not enough for you? My cousin beckoned with a voice laced in barely reigned anger. My eyes softened a bit then widened in confusion. What do you mean, Daisuke? Only my mother has been killed and not by my hand. Daisuke growled lowly in his throat. Stow the bullshit, Kirisuto. I've already know what you've done to my parents. He yelled as molten chakra mist emanated around his body with the occasional ember tapping a nearby power line or street lamp. What are you talking about, Ni-san? My mother said they were on a mission together. I asked, honestly confused. I could feel the anger rolling off of my elder cousin in droves. He placed his right hand on his left wrist and spread his palm open. They did. But you and Shio murdered them on your way back from your mission. Didn't you? He yelled as his eyes narrowed. Hearing random assholes from this pile of shit on the map insult me was one thing, but hearing my own blood make such hurtful claims. They killed them, Ni-san. Come on, you must believe me. I exclaimed, throwing down my packs of kunai and shuriken. His arm began to gather raw energy and chakra. My concerned frown faltered to a trembling line as I felt my eyes burn. My shaking hands managed to form a seal. A clone appeared at my side. I'm sorry, Kirisuto. He started staring at me with deadened eyes and an expressionless countenance as magma chakra began to gather around his hand as I felt harsh winds and moisture surround my palm. It seems they were right, he continued. My eyes burned more as my Sharingan evolved to its next stage instinctually. Daisuke stared at the eyes, as if they were taunting him in triumph. When they said the Uchiha temptation for power outweighed a family's bond. The only sound radiating in the area was the whistling of a sea breeze and crackling of momentarily. What, you are done lying to my face? He asked in a quiet and unusually calm tone of voice. No. I said with a regretful, wavering voice. My muscles in my body tensed and gathered residue chakra in preparation to pounce. I'm not good enough to convince anyone to listen to me. If you are doing this, then there is no reasoning with you. You are one of them. You're in between the twins and me, I responded. We bolted forward simultaneously. First degree, Rasengan, shouted Daisuke as the sound of a piercing whistle penetrated the air. Frostbitten Rasengan, I shouted in response as his burning orb slid into my stitches, reopening the wound. My Rasengan hit him dead center in the sternum. He was sent fly backwards prematurely, only allowing his magma to cauterize some of the flesh around the wound, unintentionally sealing the gash as well. I gripped the skin around the still bleeding area of the wound and forced the blood there to freeze, substituting coagulation. I stood shakily, and after ensuring that Daisuke was alive and truly unconscious, I made my way home. I walked past the dead squad of root members instructed to attack my home, careful to not track any blood on the carpet. Mother always hated when I spilt stuff the most. I thought solemnly as I passed the kitchen on the way to the entrance in my parents' room at the end of the bedroom hallway. I stopped, observing Shio's old room to my left. He had moved out to an apartment about 6 months prior. It was somewhat disheveled, like always, but there was a layer of dust covering the room. Shio hated dust and cleared it out completely as often as possible. Shio always said that everything he owned was exactly where he wanted it, and that if anyone tried to clean his room, they would get a beat down. Though he was forced to hide some of his stuff whenever Mom peeked in. I smiled slightly whenever I saw the picture we took at the frozen lake in Iron when we left for a 3-month vacation. The picture had captured Dad carrying a young Hanton, Shio and a skinny tween holding up a frenzied toad with mud streaks coating his face, accentuating his grin. Seeing a younger me so happy was aggravating. To my right were the twins' rooms, doors side by side. The door on the right led to Hanton's room. It was a barren room with the exception of a stylized poster of an Enbu squad, a picture of Mom and Dad on his nightstand, and picture of us all in the bottom right corner of his dresser mirror. I walked over and touched the photo gingerly before I hesitantly took the photo and put it in my jacket inner pocket. I also noticed a small seal etched in the mirror, behind where the photo would be. Curious, I pushed some chakra inside. But the seal refused to activate. It's probably porn or something, was all I mumbled as I left Hanton's room. I eyed Masaru's room. The room was well cluttered. Assorted articles of clothing were scattered across the floor, and the discs to her video game console were all out of their cases on the floor near her TV. Even her desk, where she mainly drew for fun and wrote her post-mission reports, was covered in books and several weathered scrolls, probably filled with jutsu. I swear no one observed the diversity of jutsu more than Masaru. She could easily become a scholar with all she knew, but instead she was one of the best kunoichi in the city. I smiled. Then my eyes were met with a disastrous sight. On the corner of her bed was a bra, which isn't strange to see in a 15-year-old's room, and a pair of boxers. I stared in disbelief and disgust until I noticed they were Hanton's boxers. I felt relief until I noticed the implications for siblings' underwear to be by the bed. I told her she should just ask Mom to buy her some to wear as well. It's like anyone would. See that she wears them. Those better be Hanton's, I exclaimed as I walked out, adding another reason to save the twins. I came upon my room to my left. I eyed it. It was rather ordinary to me. Not messy or neat, with the only distinctive feature being the posters lining the walls and random props or replicas from movies or games I favored. I felt my eyes grow heavy with tears as I saw one of my prized possessions on top my shelf. To anyone else it would just be a worn run-of-the-mill children's toy kunai, but to me it brought so many memories. I picked up the little toy with practiced fluidity. It was sky blue with stained white plastic mimicking bandages around the handle. Though the most noticeable characteristic of the toy was the 2 pieces of plastic on the corners of the kunai resembling a Hiraishin kunai. I remember my brother being so excited that he was able to buy a 3rd kunai so that he would be able to forge the first Hiraishin kunai in decades, so that when he becomes AS rank ninja the kunai would become famous again. He was able to make a Hiraishin kunai at the expense of his younger brother's favorite toy. I kept moving with a frown, remembering I didn't have time to dawdle. I found the access hatch to the hideout in my mother's closet. Our house was built where the Naka shrine once was, and thus the hideout was under our house. I found the wall my mother mentioned and noticed several Tomo engravings were jutted out slightly more and pressed several in a clockwise pattern, like how they spin inside a Sharingan. The wall made a loud noise before copious amounts of dust expelled from the edges of the wall as I drifted backwards before lowering into a hole in the floor. The room was covered by seal characters very numerous and small that had been carved deeply into the stone walls. The writer really wanted to make sure the formula lasted the test of time. The room was completely empty and the characters created a pattern made of hexagons, the only unique area of the room being a circle in the exact center of the room. The characters formed a circle that the honeycomb pattern branched off from, and in the center of the circle was an eye. It was stylized and drawn in a way that you couldn't determine if it was a left or right eye. It also appeared to be open but had no color to it. I drew a kunai and sliced open the back of my forearm. It'd be foolish to injure my hand when I could be attacked at any moment. The blood dripped in the carved iris and dispersed across it equally before segments of the stone raised up, creating a picture of my Mangekyo Sharingan. Suddenly in the opposite corner of the room the corner seemed to disappear in darkness with a bit of light shining from within. Whenever I tried to look indirectly I felt nauseous and had to look away. It was like God erased that corner from existence. Putting trust in my mother's words, I patted the area where the picture of my siblings was located and jumped into the darkness. I landed in a moonlit, damp, almost swamp-like forest with the water tower of a small town in the distance. Who might you be, kid? You're not pale enough to be dead. Barely. A disturbingly deep voice said behind me. I turned and was met with a towering figure clothed in a crimson trench coat, hat and dress clothes underneath. The strange red-tinted glasses of the man bore into my Sharingan. I tilt my head to the side and said, "Anata wa nani oidiru?" Konnichiwa. He replied, utterly confused. The tall man looked at me over his shoulder at me with a grin and spoke once more in his strange speech. I bolted in front of him and asked once more where I was, and again he merely stared at me with an amused expression and stepped around me. I tapped his shoulder, and when he turned I pointed at myself and him, then motioned with my index fingers showing them grouping up. He sighed and nodded. We kept walking for a couple of minutes until there was a clearing in the woods. The tall man stopped suddenly and tensed. I heard a loud groan. Alerted I turned, drawing my revolver, and was met with a gruesome sight. A crowd of walking corpses with violet glowing eyes and covered in various flesh wounds. I heard a deafening crack of a firearm and turned to see the tall man firing into the crowd of corpses, scoring headshots and leaving huge holes. With a hint of jealousy looking at my revolver that was dwarfed in size, I fired my weapon from the hip, spamming the hammer and getting 6 perfect headshots. The tall man whistled to get my attention. He then shot a corpse in the chest. The bullet carrying such force that it pushed the corpse into the tree behind it, causing the bark to splinter. The undead quickly rose to its feet seemingly unaffected and kept walking. The tall man then shot it in the head and it stayed on the ground. I nodded with a grin that was quickly outclassed by his own sinister smirk before turning and unloaded my weapon once more into the mass of undead flesh. In a few minutes nothing except the tall man and I remained standing, excluding a corpse that I pinned to a tree with a kunai through the eye socket, whose feet were perfectly level to the ground, which could be considered standing. Anyway, we continued walking in the direction where the corpses emerged, with the tall man chatting at me in his strange language again, I'm assuming about my performance as a marksman. Suddenly I felt the familiar mental pull that preceded a meeting with the Kyuubi. I observed my surroundings one last time with my Sharingan activated before slipping away into my subconscious as I closed my eyes. I opened my eyes and was met with a shrine with huge red doors buried into the side of a frost-covered mountain that had a blood-red water cascading down a slope into a crimson-orange sea down below. I leapt from stone to stone until I came upon the end of the mountain and walked to the shore. The orange liquid quivered as a deep voice growled in frustration. "Finally your thick skull let my summons through," exclaimed the water. "Oh, who you calling stupid?" I screamed indignantly at the body of water. "Enough," the voice exclaimed with a small tidal wave as if to insinuate its point. "Boy, we aren't in the elemental region anymore," the voice said as it started to explain something with a lecturing tone. "No shit? Really? I didn't get that, brainiac," I muttered. "Silence, you egotistical, sad excuse for a man. We aren't home, you can't understand anyone, and there are monsters walking around, so for once in your meager life shut the fuck up," the voice yelled, displaying enough power that the ocean resembled a roaring flame for a split second. I fell on my ass in shock. "Kurama yells at everyone except me." Getting a hold of the pressure upon us, I nodded and remained seated. "Okay. Now I've listened to your pal talk for about half an hour now, so I'm confident enough to say that I think I recognize the language," said the chakra entity. "Ah, really? What is it? I said, trying not to stutter. One of the clans the Jubi exterminated in the First Era spoke a less refined dialect of this language. The Jubi would transform its splinter beasts into man-like forms at times to infiltrate villages, like this one, for fun. He explained as the water's current accelerated slightly, as if excited to discuss this subject. How is that fun? I asked. Oh, you know, the lust, violence and stupidity that your kind exhibit daily is so humorous to higher beings such as us that it's understandable that the Jubi would want to experience as much as possible before destroying them. He stated with a chuckle. True, I said with a sigh and a nod. I swear our species sucks sometimes when you look at us from an outsider's perspective. Anyway, let's bond our chakra so I can give you rudimentary knowledge of the language. I must warn you, Thai, you will have very little room for inflection since you are forcing your vocal cords to produce unfamiliar noises. That's a side effect of being a chimp. The Kyubi said as a stream of water flowed out of the ocean and touched my feet and started to rise around my body in spiral columns. Fuck off. I muttered before I exhaled slowly as I felt an intrusive, ancient presence invade my mind with a primal tenacity. I grit my teeth as the demonic chakra altered my vocal cords to be more accepting to the foreign syllables. After several moments of discomfort, suddenly the invasive presence ceased its barrage and my discomfort subsided. Well, that was shitty, I said in the foreign language. Good for you, now get the fuck out of here, I need to rest. The sea said with an annoyed tone. Oh, and by the way, duck. He quickly added, a bird? Here? I thought as I was brought back to reality. I opened my eyes just in time to see a low branch collide with my forehead. Fuck a duck, he meant to duck. I groaned as I tried to rub the pain away in my forehead. I told you to duck, Whiskers. The tall man exclaimed with a sadistic chuckle. I subconsciously pulsed my chakra to check if my mother's mask hiding my true appearance was still in effect and discovered it was. Confused, I stated, who the fuck are you calling Whiskers? As politely as possible. Oh, so you do speak English and like an American too. It matches somehow, he said with a grin that countered his somewhat disappointed tone of voice as he adjusted his glasses. Yeah, it's been a while, plus I've never had to actually speak this language as it took me a while to remember. I stared as he motioned for me to keep moving as we made our way through a small town we must have come across when I was on autopilot. I eyed the hectic state of the shops and the random patches of blood and gore. I'm Kirisuto Uzumaki and I'm new to wherever the fuck I am. Who are you? I said, casual as a social reject could as I searched my backpack for my shotgun, just in case we ran into any more dead guys. Just as I found the firearm we came upon a large wooden door. I craned my head to further observe the building and was met with a one-story high, old, pentagon-shaped building. You'll see soon enough. For now just follow and keep at the ready. I smell trash nearby. Was all the tall man said before we entered the building. The building was filled with symmetrical rows of long benches with a podium in front of a large cross with what appeared to be a person nailed to it. Must be a weird memorial or something. Still, that's pretty depressing. Is he a martyr or something? I thought before noticing two silhouettes arguing in the shadows. The tense silence was pierced by a feminine voice's cry for help, followed by a pair of gunshots and a panicked clack. I took a step forward, bringing my shotgun to bear only to be blocked by the tall man's arm. Wait, I'll handle this, Whiskers, he said with a surprising amount of seriousness and joy in his voice. I simply scoffed and complied, if only to see how the tall man will handle a situation that required boring-ass diplomacy as opposed to easily more entertaining violent disagreements. Basically, I want to see how much shit he can talk. My thoughts were suddenly disturbed by a sickening, egotistical voice. I need a loyal slave. There is no way a girl your age with such a pleasurable body could be a virgin. I will enjoy every inch of your being before I drain it of life and make you nothing but a sack of flesh for my disposal. The creepy shadow said in an appalling tone, giving me the sufficient desire to kill the bastard. He reminds of that pig from back home. I thought before a small smile grew as I remember using his fat blood to slaughter those cattle. I ducked under the tall man's arm and rushed towards the man's shadow and grabbed his shoulders, yanking him away from the girl, then pivoted to fling him into the cross. Before he made contact, I fired a duo of shells into his back, staining the wall with decaying, blackened blood. I then turned to the girl, sticking my gun out for her to get up, which she did and then immediately moved, so I was between her and the creep. This is why I hate people. They do stupid shit like this just for a moment of physical, vain pleasure. I despise how demeaning and feral some people act to get what they want. Like this. Dino, not even a dog is this low. This bitch before me is so weak and ill-suited to live, and yet he does. And so many more like him do. It makes me so angry. Why do they get to live? I thought, simmering with hate. You miserable little shit. The creep screamed as he burst out from behind a pew, only to catch another shell in the midsection before dispersing into gray smoke. Shadow clones? I thought silently to myself as I reinserted a trio of shells into my shotgun before cocking the lever. You seem to not be as pathetic as I originally thought if you can turn into mist. The tall man said with a hint of interest. Who might you be, good sir? I can tell you are a vampire as well. Do you wish to join up? Said the creep from his hiding place. Using this time to prepare for battle, I started to consciously monitor my chakra flow and reached for my sword. I then stopped, confused, when I noticed how hard it was to utilize, let alone feel, my chakra flow. I assumed using through the time, space would take a lot out of me, but it must have weakened the Kyuubi as well, hence why it took so long for him to get through my thick skull. I frowned. This was quite bad. While I am good at taijutsu, I am a shinobi after all, let alone a ninjutsu-oriented type. I looked at the girl behind me with my peripheral vision. If I was a better person, I'd try to comfort her. I'd like to, but I don't really think anything I'd say would be comforting. I tend to overthink what I say and just cause more confusion, so I just looked at her and said, just keep breathing, this'll be over soon. She tiptoed closer to my back and nodded silently, trying to calm down. I am called Alucard, and to be honest, I'd sooner shit in my hands and clap before I'd raise a finger to assist pathetic gutter trash such as you. You who aren't worthy to be called a Nosferatu, a vampire. The tall man called Alucard exclaimed with a tenacious tone as he stepped forward. The creep growled in response to being insulted, then snapped his fingers, and in an instant undead broke through the walls of the building before stumbling inside. I drew my revolver before noticing a fallen gun that resembled Alucard's. Eyeing the girl's holster, it appeared to belong to her, so I handed it to the girl and said, shoot only to protect yourself. I'll do my best so you won't have to. Okay. Aim for the head. She seemed to get a bit more confident and took the gun before pulling on the top part of it. Satisfied with her response, I turned and shot into the crowd of undead with my shotgun as well as my revolver, killing 9 undead in one go. I then holstered my revolver quickly and began reloading my shotgun as I kicked a corpse in the face, catapulting it back into the crowd, causing a couple of other corpses to stumble. Halfway through reloading, I finally had gathered enough chakra for a C-rank jutsu, so I slung my shotgun over my shoulder and walked backwards, forcing the girl to move back, as then I made the horse then tiger hand seals, because doing the jutsu seal less would use more chakra. I held my hands on the tiger seal and kneaded my chakra into flames. I felt the fire build up in my throat, and at the last moment I mentally exclaimed, fire style. Fireball. Then I expelled a stream of flames from my mouth that rushed towards the crowd of corpses in a ball of flames, turning the majority of the undead into ash and lighting others ablaze. My jutsu was cut off prematurely when I received a strong hit to my back and flew into the pews, breaking one in half as I collapsed. I looked down and saw a bit of rib sticking out of my chest. Snarling, I turned around while drawing my revolver, only to see the creep had the girl in a sleeper hold, causing me to hesitate. What the hell are you? Exclaimed the creep. I'm about to be a whole lot worse. You don't let her go. Was all I responded with before pushing my bone back in and letting the creep see it heal instantaneously. H stared his mouth agape, giving Alucard the chance to shoot the creep through the girl, blasting both of their chest cavities apart. Infuriated, I bolted towards Alucard and slashed through his body, decapitating him in one harsh motion before sprinting to the girl. She was crying and struggling to breathe. I pulled out some morphine from a military first aid kit, then injected her with some before using a basic medical jutsu. But I used almost all of my chakra in the fireball. I couldn't help her. She looked up at me and smiled weakly. Thank you, said the girl before she went silent, trying her best to fight off death. I grit my teeth. I failed again. Because of my carelessness, I allowed another good person to die. I stood up and grabbed from the floor by the throat the creep and shoved him against the wall before shoving my fingers into the creep's eye sockets. As I screeched, I spoke to him in a voice quivering with hatred. I hate everything about this world. Any world. Where bullshit like this happens. I don't understand why we even want to live if wastes of life like you walk around doing nothing but fueling the egotistical assholes in power to guide the cattle to be slaughtered, all at the expense of the few who live well. I hate that people like me have to exist as a bridge that good people step on to go on with their lives, and I hate that scum like you hide beneath me like a mosquito that is so pathetic that it can't survive without my blood. You are nothing, so will become nothing. Die. I slammed my hand against the wall, turning the creep's brain to mulch and the back of his skull into fragments. I turned around and saw Alucard biting the neck of the girl. With my thirst for vengeance reinvigorated, I began to run at him but blacked out to the sound of a gunshot. After a sadly masturbation-free 1-hour nap, which involved Sarah's observing me diligently to make sure I didn't relieve any combat stress, I was led by the old man, who politely stated his name was Walter, to the armory. Upon walking in the room, I came upon Sarah's inspecting an oversized large bolt-action rifle. She was observing the open chamber where the bullet would be placed when she suddenly addressed us and spoke with enthusiasm. "Hi Walter and Whisk." I immediately shot down her attempt to be cute. "No," was all I responded with. "No?" she asked in an amused tone. "We aren't playing this game. I love games but not this game." Got it," I said sternly as I walked to an ornate wooden table covered in firearms along with attachments and knives. I picked up a long curved dagger that was at least a foot long with grip covered in a black artificial substance used to improve the traction of the blade handle. Sarah's took a step back, then nodded silently with a nervous grimace. I reacted with a frown. "Calm down, I'm just playing. I don't give a shit what you call me, okay? I'm just teasing," I said after a sigh as I flicked her nose in punishment. She rubbed her nose with overdramatic tears-filled eyes. "No need to be an ass," she said before flicking me in the chest, sending me into the nearby wall. Sorry," I said with a high-pitched groan of a voice before sliding out of my imprint in the wall and collapsed in a heap. Walter helped me up and dusted off my mustard yellow dress shirt and black slacks that were identical to Sarah's uniform. He then placed a top-heavy firearm in my hands. "Mr. Uzumaki, I'd like to introduce you to the M6's personal defense system, but I named this specific one the Hyena," he started before I interrupted in the most polite of ways. "The Adder. It will be called the Adder," I stated. "Very well, a man has the right to name his closest of allies, his weapons," he said while adjusting a few of the Magnum's screws with a tool. I nodded and waited for him to finish his final adjustments while scrutinizing the table, seeking out my mother's kusanagi. Just as my empathetic, black gaze met the ivory Sakura woodsheath, Walter spoke once more. "Plus, Adder is a lot more favorable to the ears than the Hyena. This name is less indignant," he said as he handed me the weapon and walked me to the ammunition locker in the opposite corner of the room. "Thanks. Which type does my Adder take?" I asked in a slightly more respectful tone of voice, pointing at the ammunitions locker, to the surprise of Sarah's, who was calibrating the iron sights of her rifle. "This handgun is loaded with 12 by 40 mm M045 semi-armor piercing high explosive 50 caliber rounds with blessed silver tips, but if given the circumstances, rounds that won't gut an armored car are also applicable," Walter said with a delighted smile that reminded me of Naruto Oji, causing me to adopt the ghost of a true smile on my own face. "Thank you for taking the time to choose this for me, Walter. I'll treasure it by making sure the rounds are never sitting still too long. And that most meat gray matter," I added with a cheerfully threatening tone that made Sarah's snort. Walter, however, merely chuckled and sprawled his hand against his chest before performing a quick bow. "One mustn't ignore a man after his own heart," he stated with a bow, which was promptly returned before I retrieved the kusanagi from the table. "Where is a training area?" I asked Walter. He said he would lead me, but I insisted that he must inform Sarah's about her rifle first. I said that I'd manage if given a single direction. He responded by saying, "Very well, go north." After a second of translating the word to elemental, I reinstated the word to ensure I got it right. "North," I said, pointing in a direction. "North," said Walter, pushing my hand in the proper direction. It took me a second, but I walked over to a window, saw where the sun was, then moved accordingly. Only to get lost, then give up and walk away from the manor a considerable distance and start to train. I'll never get why people can't just point where to go. It's so much easier than stating cardinal directions and shit, I said under my breath sarcastically, mocking my inability to pay attention as I pressed the index and middle fingers of each hand together and formed a cross. I then said in a more comfortable tongue, Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. To the amazement of a nearby unseen gardener, 20 solid copies of my superb self appeared and looked at me intently, waiting for orders. I made sure the adder was secured tightly in its holster, then removed my dress shirt and tie carefully and placed them on a hanger I made by impaling a kunai in a tree. I turned and said one word while drawing my blade from the sheath slung across the back of my midsection, come. 2 hours later I walked into Ms. Hellsing's office after having some clones blasted me with a water jutsu to clean away the grime, a bit too enthusiastically in my opinion, but I digress. After I dried off I got redressed and I used a seal I placed on my bedsheets to use a new space-time jutsu I designed to return quickly to a certain spot. I ended up in the laundry area in the middle of a pile of used sheets and it seemed one of the soldiers had a wet dream at some point. All around this was a bad test run for my seal formula. Anyway, after I screamed in anger and embarrassment I snuck all the way to the showers, cleaned up and disposed of my uniform. Not wanting to be a bother I used a transformation jutsu to make it seem that I was still wearing a shirt. I can steal another uniform top or would be provided with another one later. All the sidetrack shit aside, I was in Integra's office with Sarah's to my left, Alucard to my right and Walter by Integra's side. Over the last several hours 3 entire families have been slain, 11 people total, 6 of which have been found drained of blood and the last 5 butchered, children included. The perpetrators also smothered the walls with heretical messages in the blood of the victims. The reason we were contacted was that there are suspicions that these murders are vampiric in origin, so you 3 and a couple of Hellsing agents will search the surrounding suburbs for the murderers and kill them. Integra said before inhaling a cloud of smoke from a cigar, which was amazing since she didn't seem winded after such a long sentence. The others seemed unfazed, but I fought off the urge to cough. I hate smokers, another example of humanity's stupidity. I am so intelligent that I will slowly kill myself by destroying my lungs as well as increasing my chances of dying horribly. Oh, and set something on fire and stick it in my mouth. I thought bitterly, subconsciously pressing my hand against my ribs. Some people don't get to choose such things. I thought before my thoughts refocused back onto Integra. Alucard is in command. You will leave immediately. Search and destroy all freak forces, yelled the woman before taking a long drag of her cigarette while shooing us away. I frowned slightly, thinking of the expression Sarah's made from how Integra said, freak. 1 hour and 30 minutes from Hellsing HQ in a small suburban town. Tell me the appearance of the 2 suspects you saw, officer. I said in my best charismatic voice, which resembled a shy, awkward person's voice as opposed to an aggravated homeless man. Audrey, sir. They appeared to be a couple, a man who appeared to be in his early 20s, had pale hair and pale skin. The woman had long brown hair and a nose piercing and the man had a lip piercing, I think, or was it a sore? Oh, and they appeared to have an automatic handgun. I'm sorry, that's all I remember. I was being shot at AA after all. Audrey said in a scared tone before breaking down slightly as tears flowed from her face. I was used to such behavior on the front lines. Humans don't respond too well the first time they see a person who's willing to kill them. I awkwardly placed a hand around her body momentarily and patted her head before passing her to a nearby EMS worker. Take her home and post an officer outside her house, it'll make her feel better, I said to the EMS worker before turning to Audrey. You've done well, Officer Audrey. Rest, forget and then go out and focus on your work. That's how you keep on living with a job like this, I said before turning and walking away. I heard the woman's sobs lessen a bit, but my blood's cry for retribution cancelled out my sympathy for her weakness. I walked past Sarah's, who looked upon the exchange with mixed reactions. I learned long ago that tears won't bring peace, but blood will always bring some form of conclusion, for better or for worse. Whether that ending is good or bad depends on how much blood a person is willing to shed on either side. I leapt from roof to roof, painfully slow, since the officers Alucard so wisely assigned to accompany me decided that the giant, loud, slow piece of junk they called a car had to be inconspicuously slow when they patrolled the street. I didn't get why they refused to get their lazy asses out and walk. Don't worry, Kit, maybe one of these houses will have a hot redhead with a nice, moistened. I heard the 9-tailed fox whisper sensually in my head, causing me to flinch. Shut the fuck up. I squealed in my skull as I almost slipped off a particularly soggy old roof attached to one of these stacks of shit. These Angloids, they're called British or English, kit, not Angloids. The fox said, interrupting my thoughts once more. I rolled my eyes. Excuse my ignorance. I almost slipped off a particularly soggy, ancient roof attached to one of these stacks of shit these English dudes call a house. I said sarcastically, emphasizing the revised word in my sentence. You're excused for now. Talk to you later, the bastard fox said hurriedly before the pull that filled my skull while he spoke dissipated. What I learned a while back was the sound of his sleepy voice, which sounds like a dull tsunami rather than an earthquake. As I touched down on the next roof ahead of me, I noticed I could smell fresh bread being cooked a block away and felt the rough texture of the roof tiles against my claws. Wait, claws? I looked at my hands and noticed the copious amounts of dark keratin that formed sharp talons and the hair on my arms standing up before I leapt across the last house of the block to the one of the following block and saw my reflection in a large puddle below me, noticing my large fangs, dark whisker marks and crimson eyes with a slit-like pupil that dilated in excitement, almost as if it was dancing with happiness from being discovered. I frowned as it seemed my ability to manipulate chakra was screwed in every way. The fox's distant behavior and my sudden decrease in chakra control may be linked. I decided the steady flow of demon chakra that caused my initial Jinchuriki state could come in handy while I was tracking down the vampire. I suddenly detected the scent of human blood, gunpowder and tears. I landed on the roof of the agent's car to their surprise and bore into their eyes, one being eye patch wearing, ponytailed man and the other overweight blonde man, then bolted to a house to my right yelling for them to follow. They pulled over and bolted out on foot toting rifles that looked to be made of plastic or something. Ignoring the agents, I bit my thumb, smearing the blood down my arm across my snake summon tattoo before leaping forward, slamming my hand into the floor and rolled forward on my feet. A pitch-black snake with a white pattern down his back appeared and looked into my eyes with the hint of recognition as the agents reached the door. I pivoted on my foot, motioned the officers to take cover to my right against the wall and kicked in the door with a roar. I felt the shudder of bullets hit my flesh before I collapsed. The pale-haired man who had the air of an immature boy walked forward and kicked the wanker who stormed in when he was about to enjoy his girl. He then turned to his girl and smiled with a look radiating in bravado across his face. But his perverted fantasies were silenced when an enormous snake leapt through the doorframe and sank its teeth into the man-child's right ankle as it constricted his leg. I followed through with my summons attack by slashing at the boy's left haunch with my talons, ripping ligaments, and then sunk my fangs into his calf as fell. He collapsed, so I let the agents finish the kid with a trio of rounds to the skull and heart. I looked up only to see a broken window and a silhouette with a cape-like shadow flowing behind it, no doubt caused by the girl's long fluttering hair. I lunged through the window and bolted towards the girl on all fours. She turned and in a surprising show of courage fired a burst of rounds into my face and torso from her submachine gun, causing me to lose my footing and fall in a heap. I felt my temper flare as my flesh pulsed in pain and flared the last of the precious chakra I was able to mold earlier. I converted my chakra and anger into a hateful crimson. I stared at the girl and screamed in my head, fire style, Grey Dragon Fire Jutsu. Dark, burnt orange flames accented with black lines that looked like a roaring dragon burst forth from my mouth at a great speed. The elemental creation flew towards the girl and devoured her with an explosion. With the threat extinguished, I felt the Kyuubi's chakra flow through me and move towards my face and torso, closing the wounds, expelling fragments of the bullets fired into my body. The sudden drop in my chakra caused the jutsu creating my false shirt to fail and exposed my torso. But thankfully my mother's transformation jutsu that hid my disturbing visage was bonded to a literal, physical mask. Laughter caused my relief to crumble and I looked up to see the woman standing in the flames and walking towards me. Most of her upper torso was striped of all but some strips of burned matted flesh, the rest of her skin was red, covered in boils, and her hair was burning. The stench stained the air with the smell of burning flesh, hair and hairspray. She walked toward me at a shuffling pace as her flesh regenerated slowly. She bolted toward me and ripped my mask from my face, searing my flesh as well from the heat. As if a pathetic, ugly freak like you could kill me. The woman laughed out. It turns out my mask straps had come undone, Part of the mask slid out of place and my tattered body was revealed. But I didn't notice. That word stuck and nothing else did. Their word and the others like it. Freak. I heard voices from my childhood pelt the fragile walls protecting my sanity. Look, it's him. The son of that whore, a ratty, trashy woman exclaimed from across the street as she passed my 10-year-old self, walking to school alone. You aren't like Daisuke. You're Uchiha. It's all over your face. You look nothing like your dad. You're ugly, said one of my parents' former classmates. She hated that my mother married my dad, even though she never spoke to my father once. I was 15, home after a hard mission and on my way out of a movie. The bitch grabbed my wrist and yelled at me. That was hard to deal with. Save her, screamed a soldier under my command as an artificial-tailed beast snatched up his wife with the intent to devour her. Some remnant soldiers posted by the beast noticed me and sinister grins developed on their faces. Look, it's the snake trying to be a hero, they said before I used a manipulation jutsu to rupture the creature's body, causing it to bleed copiously. Then oh, it's you, the man said as he held his wife close, looking down upon me. Angered, I reached towards my blade's hilt and prepared to treat such insubordination. You will be known as Nine, one of our best and most respected, uttered Shimura as he gave me my blade and my mask, making me an official root agent. You let my boy die. You call yourself a leader? Screamed the mother of one of my troops as she threw the empty bottle of liquor she'd been drinking. Given her state of intoxication, I guess she'd been drinking all night. You're a monster, with no feelings. That doesn't know fear or loss or pain. You are just an animal. You can't save everyone, Kiri, echoed through my head, part of my father's last words. You'll never leave us. Do you promise? My younger brother asked quietly, his eyes full of tears beside my bed in the hospital. I was nearly mortally wounded in a mission. My sister was asleep at my feet. The twins slept by my side through the night. Find someone, Kiri, my mother uttered, my teeth grit further as I let out a piercing scream, causing the woman to take a step back. He won't make it, the illness has taken hold. My doctor exclaimed with vigor to a nurse outside my room. My 8-year-old self stifled a shrill cry as I pressed the call button for help. Blood pooled between my fingers as tears flowed from my eyes. Miso, they need you and me. They needs both parents, my mother said with a cry as she kissed my dying father. I was around the corner, angry at myself. It was my fault, I was too weak. Yuko. He won't have anyone if I don't. He won't live without Kurama. My dad responded sadly. Daddy. I uttered by his side. My father's blood formed an elaborate seal on my abdomen and his bloody hand clenched my own. Don't worry, Kiri. Daddy won't leave you alone again, he said soothingly as he stroked my hair for the last time. Don't cry, Kiri. Mommy, my mom said as I screamed as a child, holding my father's corpse. She. My brother uttered. No one will ever, everyone, the mother, the soldier, the store owners, their men of God, their children, their sons and whores exclaimed. My eyes opened and a crimson-stained onyx diamond surrounded by multiple isosceles triangles stared up at the undead wench. My eyes stung in pain as tears of blood cascaded down my scarred, branded cheeks. The bodily fluid cascaded down my bare chest, traveling down the hundreds of words and warnings inscribed into my chest with burning hot metal. Love you. I screamed, Amaterasu. Flames from hell into existence and consumed the monster before me. The flames burned her with endless vigor. Even though it started to rain, the flames burned even brighter, as if the flames' natural opposing force made them even more anxious to display their strength. She screeched loudly as I sprinted toward her and punched a hole in her chest before I began to beat her face repeatedly until my knuckles started to bleed. She yelped like a mutt to the sound of thunder that pounded my eardrums, along with a steady smack sounding from my fists. With one last hard punch, I caused all the blood in her body to flash freeze, and suddenly the woman's skull exploded, spreading frozen gore everywhere over the cobblestone path. I turned and Alucard with similar fiery determined eyes, and Sarah's recoiled in fright. I immediately turned, covering my face, and ran into an alley more in fear than embarrassment. They must have planned this. Planned to hurt me too. Just like them. I'm not dying yet. I must. I thought, only to be halted as I felt the prick of a needle entering the side of my neck, and then my brain started to feel fog creep up through my mind. Moments later, I overheard voices while my vision was blinded by a multitude of stars, and a feeling of nausea invaded my body. Whiskers, is, like us. Sarah's confused voice filled my head as I came back into consciousness. So is this freak friendly or feral? I heard a voice to my left call out. I'm assuming a little of both, like red or knockers. Another one to my right responded. Yeah, so he's going into lockup with the alpha? Left beckoned with a curious tone. I think so. Wanna make some extra quid? Right replied enigmatically. What's your proposition? Left said with interest. Cage match. The last time someone, accidentally, paired up some freaks, Bo killed that fugly, gargantuan ghoul and had a haul of 250 quid. Right said once again with his accent that somewhat resembled Saras's but sounded like a child on helium. Fuck yeah, let oi. What you doing up, skinny? Left suddenly said, noticing my grimace. I opened my opaque irises and looked the orange-haired fuck square in the eye and said, sorry for coming off a 24-hour bender with your mom so early, fuckface. I said with a smirk. He wasn't impressed as I was though. He clocked me in the jaw and the red curtain came back without the dramatic crawl this time. I woke up even more disoriented and felt only my legs, which were dragging across the cold, dirty cement floor. Trying to get a better idea of my location, I activated my Sharingan and the blurs became definite silhouettes, but also my head began to ache. I began to get feeling back in my arms and then neck. I could practically taste the mold in the air. I pushed myself to my feet and hoisted myself to the ceiling. Using chakra, I attached my palms and feet to the ceiling, sprinted on all fours down the hall. I came upon a large double door which I tried to pry open, causing a seamless door to cover the hall where I entered and the double doors I was struggling with to open. I fell inside the dark room and knew immediately I wasn't alone. I leapt off the floor and settled into a crouch, looking up at the dirty blonde-haired giant of a man whose yellow eyes reflected momentarily like a dog's in a flashlight's glow. I stared into his eyes with distaste before saying, great, another corpse to deal with. The man in front of me had to have been at least 7 or 8 feet tall. He appeared to be in his late 30s or early 40s, a dark shade of blonde hair and lightly tanned skin as well as burning orange eyes. He remained seated on a cot with a faded, worn sheet covering it that was suspended by chains bound to the cemented wall. The cot's chains seemed to be on their last legs after supporting this Goliath's body for some time. All in all, he was a fearsome beast of a man. Most people would fear him, but I hate most people so. I greeted the man with a wave, though we were mere feet from each other. Hi. The giant remained motionless and just stated, hello. I began eyeing the other cot and sensing my sore legs beg for rest. They get you the same way? I said as I sat down on the identical cot opposite of the giant, tugging on the hem of the plain white t-shirt the Hellsing dickheads put on me while I was unconscious. Yep, was his response, which I promptly mimicked, yep. I then had a small panic attack and checked to make sure I was wearing the same underwear beneath the gray sweatpants. My sense of dread dissipated when I noticed I was wearing the same boxer briefs. At least Alucard didn't see my junk or something, I thought as I settled back into the cot. I'd have to adopt a new level of virginity protection if that happened. Beyond my face and personality, of course. They didn't molest you, kid. They aren't that bad. We deserve to be here, he said, causing me to turn to him with a scowl. I didn't do anything wrong. I killed a vampire whore and went a little overboard, I said in aggravated tone. They said you turned a woman's body to ash by looking at her and that every step you took scorched the ground around you. They said your face, he started before I cut him off angrily. You don't have the right to speak about me. None of you know anything about me, who I am or where I come from. You are all nothing but bugs and all I want to do is step on you, but I was taught restraint so I stomp around you instead. I said in a tone full of nothing but sincerity. There was no arrogance or pride, as if I was stating a well-known fact. He looked at the ground, shaking his head to the negative, and stated with a voice radiating in shame, I know you are a monster like me. You kill like a mindless animal. I frowned. No, I am a monster, but I wasn't born one, I was forced into being one. He looked at me with his lone visible eye that glowered with intensity before saying, you have killed those that aren't monsters, I can see it in your eyes, you lack innocence. You also have something much worse in your eyes. Hate. You want to kill someone very badly. You feel it is justified too, that's a combination destined to cause you pain. I rubbed my forehead to fight off a headache that was no doubt caused by this giant's bullshit. You're damn right, I've killed many and they all deserved it. They ruined my life or weren't worthy of their own. I have nothing and I live to make sure they lose everything as well. He started ramble wildly. You sit here in your puddle of pity and claim to be human when you scream such hateful things like a demon. I merely glared in response as my facial muscles began to tense up, my canines gained mass and sharpened along with my other teeth. My lips darkened and cracked, black streaks of melanin stained my cheeks. My fingers with growing claws dug into my thighs and my hair began to stand on end. The transformation came to a head when my onyx eyes became stained with crimson and my now visible iris became slitted. People like us should have been smothered at birth by our mothers, was the most recent shovel full of bullshit that spewed from his mouth. My chakra points all flared and the force of the increase of power caused the walls and bench I sat on to creak and crumble. The chakra I stored from my time asleep and my time rotting in front of this bitch seemed to help my chakra coils heal from whatever damage the time, space jutsu caused. I didn't feel that I made a complete recovery, but my chakra reserves were around Shunin or Jonin level at least. Anger clearly permeated through my eyes as I looked upon the giant. You shut your pathetic mouth. A person like you who has time to wallow in regret and not accept who and what they are should just die. I hate everything that you do, but I must live and assure that no child goes down my path. There must not be any more demons. More children who are destined to have to live completely alone and turn into monsters. Who are hated for simply existing. I can't die because I made a promise to the only two people I care about in this world. I yelled before squinting my eyes in frustration, fighting away the burning sensation of tears and sweat irritating my eye as a thought of what once was crossed my mind's eye. Years ago. Hey, Kiri ni. I heard my little sister yell from outside through my small window as I ate breakfast with miso in my room. What Maizuru? I asked after swallowing the delicious, scrumptious, orgasm-causing bacon. Pissed. Come over here, she replied as I scratched my nose and remained seated. Why do you whisper if you just yelled? Whatever. I stacked some books on my bed and looked through my window. I saw a pair of small figures with one in the mud and the other stood on the outskirts of the mud puddle. Hanton won't leave the mud alone. I want to play in that little pool in the corner, but I can't move it alone. Maizuru exclaimed, causing me to sigh and run to the backyard with miso in tow. I wrapped my arms around Hanton's chest and pulled him away from the mud puddle. He immediately started to cry and almost hit me with mud. I put him down on the edge of the puddle and turned to Maizuru. Water hose. Now. She ran and instead of handing the hose to me she decided to place her thumb on the nozzle to create an S-rank water jutsu, also known as increasing pressure, to make a stronger spray and spray us down. I pointed at Maizuru and looked at Miso. Charge, I exclaimed, causing the fox to yip in agreement and gallop on his little legs to Maizuru, only to be sprayed as well. Miso tumbled backwards into the mud, then he proceeded to play dead. Damn it, I swear if you two weren't such babies I'd leave you in a ditch somewhere. I yelled, causing to Hanton finally speak up. Nissan said, damn it. I'm telling Mama. He then proceeded to immediately sprint on his chibi legs inside the house. I followed, trying to be quiet as possible and sneak back into my room, think along the way. I swear these brats will get me killed. Present, I wandered the many darkened hallways of the Hellsing prison for about 20 minutes before admitting defeat and biting down on my forearm hard enough to break the skin and draw blood. I dipped 4 of my fingers in the blood before slamming my spread hand on the cement floor. Black archaic markings that had Tomo identical to the trio of Tomo floating in my crimson irises flowed out from under my hand like water flowing through a creek. Miso appeared in a puff of smoke, barking excitedly as he climbed up my leg and wrapped his body around my shoulders. I stroked Misa's whiskered cheek before voicing my request. I need to find a way out, Miso. I hate to admit, but I'm lost. So can you. I guess. Help me. Miso just stared at me expectantly and then leapt to the ground and planted his butt down. Miso the fox seemed to be pouting. I sighed. I'm sorry I haven't summoned you recently, kid. It's just that I didn't know if these Hellsing people could be trusted and didn't want you to be hurt. I said before reaching to pet the fox. Miso leapt upwards and sank his teeth into my forearm, causing me to yelp and pulled my arm back. What the hell, kid? Miso looked up at me with wet eyes, then laid out on my feet while whimpering. I won't leave you, Miso. We are all either of us have now. We are alone and no one that cares about us is alive or can help. Miso started to whimper louder and his ears hung low in sadness. I didn't mean to depress him further. I reached toward another seal tattoo on my ribs under my loose shirt. However, I won't let either of us die, especially you, since you are my only friend, Miso. We will grow stronger together, whether it be here or somewhere else, and we will return for Masaru and Hanton, maybe even Kanade and Shio if they need help. I tapped the tattoo and a cold object wrapped in plastic appeared. The officials of the Empire will try to deface us and our family, so no one will attempt to challenge Shimura's reign. So everyone will just think we are terrorists, so the Empire, mainly Shimura, is their savior. Their empire that our family died and fought for, starting with the Shodem Hokage, Hashirama, creating Konohagakure, and finished when my grandfathers, Naruto and Sasuke, created this unified, peaceful nation. I said before craning my neck to rip the plastic open with my teeth. The land they stand on was tilled by us and their air was exhaled from our dying breaths. So I will return and reclaim our birthright. I said as I handed the orange popsicle to Miso, causing him to stop whimpering and tentatively reach and grasp the treat in his jaws. His behavior caused me to smile serenely. Even if I must slaughter then all. I placed my hand in my pocket and felt the rusting cast iron of Shio's birthday present. They will remember our name. Miso and I walked down the dirt road leading away from the inconspicuous industrial laundromat where my prison was hidden, until I met the highway, to which I said, "Fuck it," and started walking to my right, resisting the urge to second-guess myself as I walked for a long while. Too many fucking hours later, after a long time seeing nothing but ugly woods and swamplands, I saw a dark blur on the dawn-lit horizon that resembled a building. In a burst of speed from hopes of getting something to eat or drink, Miso and I bolted down the hill towards the shadow on the horizon. We came upon an old farmhouse. I then saw a faded cobblestone well which thankfully wasn't dry, so I used a water jutsu to draw some water from the well to quench our thirst. After drinking our fill and sealing away an old bucket, which I washed, of water for later, I scooped up Miso and put him on my shoulders, then made our way into the woods in search of food. I walked past many a rotten, hollowed-out tree and moss-covered rocks. Using Sage Mode to find prey crossed my mind momentarily before I decided to give my own senses some exercise and leapt up to the high branches of a tree, activating my Sharingan in search of the slightest unnatural movements. I caught sight of a doe-eating shrubbery in a small clearing, causing me to draw my kunai and prepare to throw it at the doe's base of her skull, only to be interrupted by a large black wolf clamping down hard on the doe's throat and using its jaw to snap its neck. I growled in anger and decided to stalk the wolf until an opportunity to kill it and steal its prize without a fuss arose. I followed it as the wolf dragged its catch to what I assume is its den, and ready to kill the wolf in a similar way I would have killed the doe. Several wolf pups then galloped out of the den on small legs and tore into their meal painstakingly slowly that rivaled my own. The she-wolf took a leg with some thigh muscle from the carcass and ate closer to the entrance of the den until the obvious runt of the litter, who was distinguished by a white-tinged fur coat and mix-matched eyes, walked over to her crying because he wasn't able to eat. The she-wolf almost seemed disheartened and offered her share to her child. I smiled as I saw the frail canine get to eat and smirked, seeing that he was eating with a ferocity that rivaled my own. I shook my head, then patted Misa's head, then leapt in search of more food. I stumbled and collapsed onto the forest floor, landed near a rather savage domesticated boar who tried to attack me, only to be grabbed under his fat jaw and flipped upside down on a large rock outcropping. I then stomped on his belly, making his spine collide against the ragged slopes of the outcropping, shattering the bone. The pig, however, did not die and began to squeal uncontrollably in pain, but was promptly silenced by a kunai blade to the eye socket, killing him instantly. I frowned since I didn't really want the pig to feel any pain, then turned toward the wolf den while pumping sharp wind chakra into the blade. The she-wolf ignored the pain in her stomach as she laid over on her side and let her pups feed on her milk. She thought momentarily of her mate that was shot by the man who raised prey behind the linked trees around his den, and wished that her mate had survived to be able to help the she-wolf raise their litter. Suddenly the wolf heard some movement near the mouth of the den and stood on all fours, moving the pups behind a boulder with her muzzle, then made her way through the entrance. I held the rough, moist pig hide, pushing my disgust aside as the she-wolf emerged from the cave with a low, intimidating stance, ready to strike. I remained still as the she-wolf tried to decide whether I was a threat to her pups. I dropped the makeshift bag of the innards and head of the pig in front of the wolf before climbing up a tree to safety. The wolf cautiously stepped forwards and ate the intestines after a quick taste. I smiled, then tree-hopped back to camp where Miso was no doubt hollowing out the corpse of the pig. The following day I walked down the highway once more with Miso, who enlarged himself to about the size of a large dog, walked beside me keeping up a steady, almost feline-like pace. On the horizon I saw a convenience store with a large canopy made of a building-like substance over a pair of large vehicles that looked different than the one the Hellsing agents used. I scooped Miso up in my arms, causing him to yelp in protest, and picked up the pace running for some decent food and water. I stopped just out of the door when I saw that pasted on the window a picture of me from the prison, and under my picture there was a paragraph mentioning I was wanted for assault and murder, as well as stating that as was to be reported on site instead of pursued. Apparently I'm criminally insane. I grinned before moving away from the window and using the basic transformation jutsu to change my hair so it was straight, dark Uzumaki red and in a loose ponytail. My skin got tanner and my eyes became larger and more expressive, and lastly I became shorter and younger. I appeared to be about 12 and malnourished. I walked into the convenience store dramatically before collapsing, fainting hunger. The young blonde whore that lazily manning the register suddenly became a good Samaritan and rushed to my side. "Holy shit. Are you okay, kid?" she asked, putting a hand on my shoulder. I looked up with false tears in my eyes and whimpered and said that my uncle left me out in the outskirts of town with my fox and that I hadn't eaten in a day. She pushed my face into her disgustingly accentuated chest, getting her mounds of makeup stuck in my hair before running to get food and water for me. "What do you want?" she asked. "Ramen, and a soda," I asked pleadingly, imitating how Daisuke used to act around his girls. "But you nay," she started before I started to let out fake sobs. Cuddling Miso, who shrank to the size of an average fox earlier, she started to cry once more and hurriedly ran to get instant ramen and put it in the pit where hot dogs would usually be roasted, after removing the rack of course. She then grabbed some breakfast wraps from earlier and offered me two. I opened them both and gave one to Miso and then ate mine with no complaint, even though it tasted like it was filled with a bush and had a nugget of chicken. Miso wasn't having it though and threw the wrapper on the floor before eating the single nugget of chicken in the middle. In a couple of minutes the attendant took the ramen and handed it to me. "I'll go get a spoon or something," she said before trying to remember where she kept the cutlery. "No need," was my reply as I looked at the cup with my eyes gleaming in a sense of competition. She raised an eyebrow in confusion, then had a look of surprise on her face when I put the cup to my lips and chugged all the broth before knocking the cup back farther as I widened my mouth, merrily accepting all the noodles I could handle before pulling away with a mouthful. The attendant giggled as I finished the ramen within a minute. I then walked down the rows until I came upon a black small satchel with two cords threaded through the opening to one and closed the satchel. I grabbed the bag and some packs of food I knew lasted longer when the packaging was opened, along with some Zippo lighters along with water. The attendant tried to stop me from walking out with the supplies. "Whoa kid, I could pay for the food but not all that. They'll fire me if I let you walk out of here with all this," she said, doing her best to not sound rude. But her best wasn't enough. My life is a bit more important than some money. "Okay then. Thanks for being nice, Oni-san. But I'm still hungry." Meanwhile in London, Ms. Integra was seated behind her desk in a dimly lit room, although her analog clock lying on her desk clearly showed it was the early morning. She wasn't terribly bothered by the lack of lighting. However, the fact that a schizophrenic and well-trained sociopath was running loose across her country when he should be rotting in a cell for the rest of his life. She hadn't told Sarah's where the foreigner was from and was under the impression he was receiving medical treatment. Alucard didn't seem to care, although he seemed to be somewhat disappointed to be separated from the boy who apparently radiated enough power that even he was anticipating a fight. My thoughts were interrupted by Walter briskly walking into the medium-sized room holding a small folder and small TV under his opposite arm to Integra's side, and placed the documents on her desk as well as the TV with a built-in VCR. These documents are filled with potential sightings of Mr. Uzumaki in Northern Ireland, though there is only one that is confirmed to be him. "Look," he said as he took a VHS tape from the folder and placed it in the receptacle with a click. He then pushed the small horizontally aligned triangular button to play the tape. The picture came in the form of delayed, grainy black and white security cam footage. Integra's eyes narrowed as she saw the familiar face of the escaped prisoner dressed in a mud-stained white t-shirt and similarly stained torn gray sweats. He was about to walk into the petrol station until he took note of a warrant for his arrest taped to the glass front window. Damn it. The one time someone who actually recognizes the criminal on a warrant sees it and the person is the bastard. Integra muttered under her breath as she continued to watch the small CCTV video intently. He leapt back around the corner out of sight of the clerk before his emotionless face melted into a sinister grin and in a puff of white smoke had turned into a prepubescent little boy. Integra watched with a grim expression as the boy manipulated the naive clerk into feeding him before he seemed to knock her unconscious with a single look. Integra almost lost her temper from the teen's immoral, albeit intelligent, methods to get supplies, but all her restraint wasn't enough as she saw the boy had the nerve to stop to pick up ice cream for himself and his fox. Integra then had a moment of clarity as she voiced her thoughts towards Walter. I don't recall Uzumaki having a fox with him when we recovered him from Cheddar or when he left for the suburbs. Integra asked Walter as she tapped some of the loose ashes from the cigar she was smoking. Neither do I, Miss Integra. Are you suggesting we could use this fox to find Mr. Uzumaki? Walter beckoned after a moment of thought about all past interactions with the teen who reminded him of his younger self in the last Great War. Walter adopted a soft smile of melancholy as he compared Kurisuto to himself. Quite similar. Walter thought to himself as Integra interrupted his thoughts by violently jabbing the speaker system console call button placed on her desk. Fetch Alucard and the girl, tell them to be ready to travel by plane at any moment, she said with a voice resonating with control, before shifting to a more comfortable position in her chair before removing her eyeglasses to clean a smudge with precision. Walter, focus all your efforts on potential incidents involving Uzumaki, assaults, murders, potential supernatural activities. This boy may not be a vampire, but he is to be considered a threat nonetheless. However, Integra said as she turned to the last part of the tape. She paused and after a few seconds, played the tape, observing as the teen stopped approaching the clerk and didn't kill her. He is not a psychotic powerhouse as we first suspected. He seems to have some issues, but compared to Alucard and his kind he's normal. Perhaps I was a bit rash with the decision that imprisonment was the best course of action. Integra admitted, rubbing her eyes trying to see if her incessant headache would dull to some degree before telling Walter once more to search for potential Uzumaki sightings. Walter bowed slightly and briskly walked out of Integra's office ready to search for the teen once more. Integer put her cigar out and threw it away with a motion displaying frustration. She had the irritating feeling that the teen reminded her of someone, but she was drawing a blank on who exactly. But when more thought was put into the idea, she noticed that she knew little to none about the teen at all. LL learn more when we find him, I suppose. Integra thought before returning to finish her monthly report to the board with a sour expression on her face as a single thought crossed her mind's eye. I hate paperwork. Meanwhile, Sarah's was just trying to do the decent thing and clean up after admittedly too many days without a shower, and being new to the whole undead thing she may not know all the rules. I frowned as I did my best to wash my body with the small towel I was provided without letting my skin get too wet. Since every time the water touches my body I feel sick and nauseous, but I don't want to smell. My master said that if I drink blood all of my weaknesses will decrease in power, but I don't think I could stomach blood for a while. Moments later I felt relieved as I was finally done washing my body and moved to my hair, but I forgot I felt worse when the showerhead's water cascaded down my scalp along with my dark blonde shoulder-length hair. I quickly washed my hair, doing my best not to vomit, before I finally rinsed the soap from my head and practically sprinted out of my stall in the large female-only shower room. I dried my body more thoroughly and quickly than I ever did in my life. Which wasn't a long time, admittedly. I put a hand on my chest where I had been shot apart with ease. Even though it's been days, I'm still kinda shocked. I made my way to my room, thankful that no one in the halls bothered trying to talk to me. I could talk to people and hold a conversation, but ever since I was little I always got along better alone. I found my room and laid down on the twin-sized mattress. I finally let all my frustration show after a day of holding it deep down. I let my thoughts run wild as did my best to stifle my cries with my pillow. Damn it. Since I lost my mom and dad I have done my best with what I have, but no matter what I always end up like this. Before it was the police academy's bullshit, and before that it was dealing with everyone at school. I just want to finish something without falling apart near the end. Hell, even my life ended in such a pathetic way. I was getting groped by an undead pervert and then I got shot down. I thought before my tears seemed to dry up all of a sudden and my uneasiness died down. I then felt a bit of the pressure on my shoulders lighten as I recalled what that weird foreigner did for me. He did his best to soothe my pain, defended me and argued for my freedom when Integra said I couldn't leave. I felt a real smile grace my face after thinking that the person that actually made an effort to help me was a stranger who seems to have more problems than me. He is hard to understand though. He seems a year or two younger than me and gets along with others way worse than I do. But he doesn't seem to let his loneliness get to him. Actually, it seems like I do understand him, but I didn't see any reason as to why he freaked out and killed that woman in such a brutal way. It's almost like he hated her. He used that black fire to incinerate her in seconds. I've never seen anything turn to ashes so quickly. He didn't hesitate, he just destroyed her and then kept moving. He hid his face but his back was covered in scars and his skin was sickly pale. He looked like he should be dead, but he doesn't seem like the type who dies so easily. Like me, he must have been through a lot. I sighed and rolled in bed so that I was on my side, observing the room with no difficulty, even though the room was absolutely completely dark. Well, I'd assume it's dark. It makes no difference to me now whether it's day or night. My eyes found their way to the empty twin bed opposite me, sitting there unused with a tall chair with warped legs by its side. I chuckled as I remembered the face of that idiot when he saw that I ripped the chair from the floor and plopped it down beside him. As my giggles died down, I started to wonder where exactly the teen with such strange eyes went. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen eyes that black before in my life. I couldn't even see his iris. I thought as I drifted off into a deep sleep, only for the sensation to be ruined by Master's head phased through the floor upwards right in front of my face, causing me to scream and fall out of bed. "Police girl, be ready to fly, we will be called for soon," Alucard quickly said with his voice filled with happiness before disappearing once more. Fly? Like with a plane or as a freaking bat? I don't even know what I can or can't do anymore. I grumbled as I got off the floor, rubbing my thigh that got smacked rather hard on the bed frame when Alucard's sudden appearance startled me. I stomped my way to my dresser to retrieve a uniform. I don't know where that idiot with the black eyes went. He's not the greatest to be around, but he seems the most sane person here and he has some idea of privacy, hopefully. I woke up feeling groggy and started to struggle after I discovered I couldn't move, but my body remained still. Damn sleep paralysis. Why now? Now I'm stuck in a damn tree in a forest inn. Wherever the fuck I am, I thought in anger, if that makes sense. After a moment I silently prayed that I wouldn't fall from the tree or be bitten by a spider before I regained control of my body. I mean, God didn't protect me from seeing my family brutally murdered, but who says he won't help me out when I can't do shit? After what felt like a day, and honestly was only a minute, maybe two at the most, I regained control of my body. Just as I connected with the ground belly first, I quickly climbed to my feet and made my way to the nearby stream to get a drink, but I discovered two things nearly simultaneously as I made my way for water. The first was that when I'm out of oxygen and groggy, I have a terrible sense of direction. The second discovery was that cars can move a lot faster than I thought. After discovering I made my way to the road instead of the stream, I heard a weird horn and felt a strong yet light substance collide with my hip, causing my head to come down and smash into the hood of the vehicle as well. As I felt more waves of pain dull all other senses, I instinctively let some demon chakra leak from my body to absorb the impact. A red cloud surrounded my profile and shielded my body from the asphalt, lessening the inertia before dissipating as I slid down the road. I finally came to a halt with me laid out on my chest, growling in pain from my scraped, irritated flesh as I heard the large car stop and some of its occupants came to my rescue. The first to appear in my blurry vision was a very tall man in a black outfit who had blonde hair, green eyes and tanned skin. He placed a gloved hand under my chest and gingerly lifted me slightly to place his jacket under me, which was awesome since cold asphalt doesn't feel too good. "Gee, thanks," was all I could mutter out before groaning as my family's natural ability to heal, aided by my tenant's energy, mended my muscles, forced bones together and sealed broken skin on the areas of my body unseen. I wouldn't want to have to explain my freakish healing ability immediately after getting hit by a damn car. "Don't worry boy, I can't leave ya on the ground all bloodied, can I?" The man said with an accent similar to, but even heavier than, the attendant at the convenience store. He then slid his arms under my armpits and thighs as he carried me onto the bus which added the nearest hospital to the designated stops. The thoughts that flowed through my head as I drifted off to sleep was me beckoning my mother why she told me to use a just you that sent me to this backwater world instead of one that could kill everyone in Konoha. I don't understand why she asked me to not do what I was born to do, kill. I wasn't born to be a cook or a doctor or an artist or teacher. You have to be considered a person and taught earnestly to have a career. I was born in a family that have been killers for generations. I was trained since I could think to bring down any enemy and kill them, but for the first time in my life I was told to run. I don't like many things in this world, but I hate being told to leave my family behind and run more than anything. So whether my mom would have liked it or not, I'm getting the fuck out of here and I'm going to kill Shimura. If Alucard stands in my way I'll kill him too. The last words that I mumbled before sleeping rang true to the priest's ears. Humans suck. The priest merely chuckled and patted my unconscious head. Only when they are alone, but if they have God, or at least each other, they can live but alone. They fall. I awoke to the smell of a sterilized environment and feeling thin, crisp sheets covering my body. I opened my eyes only to immediately rub them, trying to ease some of the soreness. I used my Sharingan more back home but for some reason here it's harder to maintain them. It's hard to use any chakra here, like the opposite of that old snake's cave where I learned Senjutsu, the ability to gather energy from nature itself and emulate the abilities of a certain animals. I'm becoming reckless. Hell, I even used my Mangekyo on a half-dead opponent. I thought as I started to touch my face, feeling the deep lacerations hidden along with my birthmarks. I then felt along the side of my bed for a nurse call button. After several moments of searching I discovered a little remote attached to the IV beside me. I sighed at my stupidity and pressed the button before laying back in my now reclined bed. In about a minute a young woman with light brown hair and blue eyes walked in my room. "Do you need anything, sir?" she asked. "I want to know who brought me here and where my possessions are." I stated, doing my best to suppress a random yawn. "You'll be given your possessions when you check out. I'll go see if the person who brought you here is still around. Also take it easy. While the doctor said you somehow avoided any broken bones or such, you still got hit by a car and put strain on your body," she said. As soon as the nurse turned she yelped in surprise and nearly jumped out of her skin when she bumped into the chest of a large man. "I guess these long hours are getting to me. Anyway, this is the Good Samaritan who helped you, mister," the nurse said. The man walked in with a smile and apologized for startling her before turning to me. "I overheard your conversation outside. I am the one who helped you. My name is Alexander Anderson," he explained before offering his right hand to me. I shook it awkwardly and slightly embarrassed, unfamiliar with the gesture. "My name is Kurisudo Uzumaki. Thank you for helping me," I said hesitantly, bowing my head slightly. The man shook his head dismissively as the nurse walked out, saying she had to attend to other duties. "There is no need to thank me, boy. Anyone would have helped you. I just happened to get to you first," he said before offering his hand to me. I tentatively placed my hand in his. I am by no means used to shaking someone's hand, so I felt my face burn up when he constricted my hand. I did my best to strengthen my grip though, but the man didn't seem to notice or acknowledge it. "My name is Alexander Anderson, and if you don't mind my asking, why were you trekking those woods on your own?" he asked with a concerned tone to his voice. I quickly thought over what to say, and after a second of thought, I sighed at my forgetfulness. "Give me a moment, I forgot to ask when I can leave and how bad it was," I said aloud with a sheepish expression. "What a coincidence, I just asked before you woke up. The doctor said you received minimal injuries, no broken bones or ruptured organs, and that the injuries you did receive healed overnight. You can leave whenever you wish. It seems your guardian angel is quite diligent," he replied. "Thanks, I only wish my whole family had diligent angels," I thought to myself before sitting up straighter, nodding in thanks to Alexander, before pressing the nurse call button once more. "Do you have the money to pay them?" Alexander asked, seemingly forgetting to pursue his questioning. I visibly flinched. "Oh, no, I forgot about that. Since I was enlisted in my home country they paid for injuries," I answered, trying to think of some way out of this. "I could pay for it if you can't," Alexander offered. No, I couldn't just take your money. I was foolish enough to wander into a road. I responded sternly. I noticed you saw the bus at the last second and was fast enough to move, so you only got clipped. You also said you enlisted in your home country. Are you a soldier? Asked the man. Yes, I was special forces in my country. I have firearms, throwing and close quarters combat weapons training along with taijutsu, though I don't know how that'd matter for this situation. I answered honestly, not noticing the smile that graced the priest's features as he grabbed a chair by the door and placed it at my bedside before sitting. I am a priest from the Vatican tasked with clearing out corruption from this land, he explained. Are they ghouls and vampires? I asked, recalling the village called Cheddar. How do you know of such things? Beckoned the priest as his face contorted, confused. I was passing through a village in Britain when I was attacked by dead people. There was also some weird guy with a suit like yours rambling about being a vampire. Is that unusual? I added after a moment of reflection. I have no idea what this world has. For all I know, another version of me could exist. I must tread lightly, I thought to myself as the priest processed what I said. You're not from around here, are you, boy? Was all the priest asked. I nodded to the negative. He looked at the door momentarily before looking at me and whispering, I'll pay for your treatment and in return you help me on my mission. Does that seem fair? The priest offered while placing his hand forward. I grasped it firmly, trying not to be embarrassed by how childlike my hand appeared in the older man's grip. I mean I get free treatment and kill some zombies, I stated with a feral grin. The man adjusted his glass with a similar grin before leaving to check me out and allow the nurse to return my clothing. I received torn, blood-stained clothing, causing me to frown and ask if they had any clothing I could use. The nurse returned carrying clothes she said were donated from a local business. After a few moments of privacy, I was pleased to discover the gray sweatshirt and pants I received fitted correctly, along with my socks and underwear from the prison, survived the accident, completing my freshly washed attire. As the nurse led me to Alexander, who awaited me in the lobby, I placed my hand in my pocket, feeling the scrap of jeans I retrieved that was adorned with a seal drawn with the boar's blood. Miso. Sorry if you were worried. I was incapacitated and provided treatment. Come to my location immediately and wait by the entrance. Follow my lead, I said to the black being telepathically through the seal before removing my flesh from the cloth. I then tried to contact Kurama, but he appeared to still be weak. I'd mock him, but I am weaker as well. This world feels scarred, almost as if all things that display life have been twisted or altered. I looked at the window and saw murky gas expel from the cars rushing by and a dead bird partially flat as the asphalt. At least that resembles home. Humans still fuck everything up, I thought to myself as we entered the lobby, and after a few minutes of forms, Alexander and I left. The priest led me to a nearby car that was black and older than the ones that Hellsing used. He opened my door and ushered me in and then entered himself. He then took a deep breath and asked one question. Do you know of the Hellsing organization? He asked with a voice void of the kind tone he displayed earlier. I was found by a Hellsing operative at the village and helped him rescue a girl who was fatally wounded. The operative then turned the girl into a vampire as she requested and brought me with her to their residence. I stayed one night, then was sent on a mission because I was deemed a freak, like Alucard, and could be of use. Long story short, I messed up, got imprisoned, escaped, and got hit by a bus. I have nothing to hide, for I have no attachments to no one, Alexander, I said as Anderson listened quietly before looking me in the eye and asked, How are you different? I tried to think of a way to say I'm a shinobi to someone when had no idea what that means. My eyes are called the Sharingan. They allow me to discern my surrounds substantially better than average humans and even predict or mimic others' movements. I can also manipulate fire, water, wind and ice to fight, but that's easier to see than explain. I also have this lil fella, I said, motioning to the dog-sized fox that leapt on the car's hood, much to the surprise of the priest. He can change his size and can fight as well, if not better, than a military dog. I see. I understand why you were recruited and look forward to see the skills the Lord blessed you with, but this car was borrowed from a local priest, he said, motioning to Miso. What a boo, I started before Alexander face-palmed. Get your fox off the car, he's getting bigger, he said as the car started to tip forward. I turned and freaked out as Miso was growing to show off and was now big as a fucking horse. I opened the door and made to jump out but forgot about the seatbelt. Alexander wanted me to use and move about an inch before tearing the belt and having my face hit the mud. I wonder if Alexander's god is better. I thought silently before Miso rushed to my side and prodded my skull to see if I was fine, unintentionally causing pushing my face further into the mud. Then the rest of the seatbelt gave out and let me tumble forward. Alexander let out a hearty laugh and came around to help me up. "You and cars don't seem to get along, do they, boy?" he asked before staring as I made water appear in my hands to wash the majority of the mud away. "No," I responded before yanking on one of the little bastard's ears. "Think before you leap. If you weren't with me you'd be dead or a big bad wolf's boy toy." I threatened with a scowl. "Don't argue with your fox as if you expect him to answer, boy. Our destination isn't very far away. I can just call the priest and arrange for its repair as we walk," Alexander said as he motioned for me to follow. Half an hour later Alexander, Miso and I were still heading to the mansion where a vampire was reported to be. Alexander looked over at me. "So you claim to be able to use magic of sorts, but can you speak to animals as well?" Alexander mentioned as he motioned towards Miso. "No, I can tell what he wants though. Especially when he's mad. It may sound like a normal bark to you but there's always an implied motherfucker," I stated looking at Miso as well. "Well, that's good to know. Anyway, witchcraft aside, I believe the mansion is just around the corner. Do you have anything we can use to ensure the heathen is here? Can your fox single out the abomination scent from the stench of rotting wood and the dead men doomed to the mansion?" said the priest as I nodded to the negative. "No, but I have something else that's even better. Follow me and stay quiet until I acknowledge you. My friend is as unaccustomed to people as I am," I said before the priest nodded and followed me into the nearby forest until we came across a clearing large enough to stage a concert and stopped in my tracks. First, I took out a kunai from a storage seal in my forearm, then did the boar, dog, bird, monkey and ram hand seals before I completed the process by cutting a shallow slit in my left wrist, allowing my blood to flow down my arm. The fluid spread across the ornate tattoo on my forearm before I slammed my hands on the ground. "We have a guest, don't worry, he is not bad, and if he is, I'll take care of it," I whispered in my mind as I pumped chakra into the ground moments before white odorless smoke filled the area, surprising Alexander as he made to cover his mouth. "Don't sorry, this isn't like smoke from a fire, it only clouds your vision," I stated as he instead moved my hands for his eyes. Out of the smoke appeared a gigantic snake, that was purple in color and adorned with horn-like protrusions on its head and a rattle on its tail. The reptile arranged its body into coils slightly. The serpent placed its head directly in front of me and watched me with its yellow eyes. I placed my hand on the snout of the snake and suppressed a giggle when its large, black tongue lapped up the blood running down my wrist. "Is my blood a fitting tribute?" I beckoned the snake to the surprise of the priest. Even more surprising was when the snake replied, "I require no tribute, Chimera. I merely like the taste of blood," she stated in a rather deep, husky voice for a female, though I'd prefer to hear the snake's voice to any person's any day. The serpent then directed her attention towards the priest and did her best to hide behind me. I patted her head and said, "Don't worry, remember what I said, Katsuya. Now please assume a more travel-friendly form." She clicked her tongue in response before disappearing into a puff of smoke before reappearing as an elemental female with shoulder-length brown hair, a pale complexion and yellow eyes with human irises. Her new Ram was dressed in a feminine version of my own attire. I then moved Katsuya so she was beside me and in Alexander's line of sight. "Now introduce yourself." I as reassuring a voice that I, an antisocial professional hitman that was also the carrier for a demon, can manage. "My name is Katsuya Manda," was all the serpent said, and in a quiet tone nonetheless, though that didn't mean she did bad, so I stayed silent and awaited for Alexander to introduce himself. "It appears you are bilingual, Mr. Uzumaki. What language were you in this?" "Girl speaking? I've never heard anything like it this side of the Vatican," said Alexander in his usual passive-aggressive tone. All of my bravado disappeared when remembered either parties of the introduction spoke one another's language. Doing my best to hide my embarrassment, I motioned towards the snake and said in English, "That was a customary greeting where I'm from." She said her name is Katsuya Manda and that she is pleased to meet you, I said with a bow, which Katsuya immediately mirrored, causing Alexander to blush and slightly bow in return. I then motioned to Alexander and said in Elemental, "This is Alexander Anderson, a member of a religion tasked with exterminating monsters here called vampires, ghouls and other creatures. He is worthy of tension but not trust." She nodded, causing a strand of her hair to move and form a cowlick. I suppressed a smile and turned to Alexander, speaking once more in English. "Now that introductions are out of the way, are you ready to kill some undead?" I asked with a neutral voice, waiting for Alexander's overdramatic response. With a rather eccentric glimmer in his aging eye, Alexander drew 2 bayonets from his coat and formed a cross with them. I am ready to cleanse this land of the filthy products of Satan, the undead and the filthy heathens that pursue them. Let us make haste, boy. Let's see what this scaly lenses can do," he said in a booming, over-the-top voice. I turned to Katsuya and said, "I need you to use Sage Mode to find any anomalies in nature nearby. There should be creatures that move but aren't alive." She wordlessly sat down cross-legged with a relaxed expression and her hands in the tiger seal. I walked behind her and sat down with my back against hers, to give her reference point in case she got lost in the global consciousness. I then whispered in head softly I wouldn't startle her. "It is difficult for me to use chakra here, are you having any trouble?" I said, trying to halt my brain from coming up with too many theories for my loss in chakra control and supply. "No, my chakra coils are unhindered and this environment is actually quite pleasant," was all Katsuya said with her eyes remaining closed. Damn, then the space-time jutsu I used to get here is what caused this, or perhaps this environment affects chakra coils negatively, or... I said quietly to myself erratically before I was curtly interrupted. "I can still fight and so can you, albeit not as well, but you are amazing even without chakra. You don't need to worry about anything as long I'm here," she said, stated without leaving room for arguing. Not the best reaffirmation speech, but the fact someone even tried to make me feel better helps. I smiled slightly and nodded. "Sorry, you know how bad I am about overthinking everything," I said, rubbing my eyes subconsciously. Katsuya didn't once at all in response except for a "HN." After a minute passed, Katsuya reached out and grabbed my sleeve before opening her eyes. Family with the procedure, I activated my Sharingan and searched her memories with Genjutsu, with her blessing of course. I saw that she located and relayed the information to Alexander. Katsuya sensed dozens of ghouls and a vampire in the mansion. It appears the ghouls are carrying firearms and melee weapons as well, also some are acting different. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "I wouldn't put it past the fallen angel to tinker with his vessels of the curse of immortality." I frowned. "They appear more alert of their surroundings and much faster, also they seem to be patrolling large windows and doors, wary of hostiles perhaps," I said out loud in English to Alexander and mentally to Katsuya in Elemental. Alexander frowned at the news before motioning first to follow with his bayonets. I withdrew a kunai and shuriken pouch and handed it to Katsuya, who seemed visibly disappointed. "We can't destroy the whole forest around the manor without drawing suspicion. You have to stay in a small form, Katsuya," I said as we started to jump from tree to tree, albeit slower than usual since we were shadowing Alexander. She sighed but took the pouch unceremoniously before cutting her thumb and rubbing the substance along my seal tattoo. "You can use the Shadow's Snake's technique chakra less until the blood dries, so make it count," she said, secretly upset with how deep she cut her thumb. She overestimated the durability of her scales hidden behind the human illusion. I reached over and froze the blood lining the wound, freezing the in droplets small enough to be safe and non-invasive. She flexed her hand and was surprised when the seal held and the cold numbed the pain as a bonus. We exchanged nods before remaining silent and focused on the journey to the manor. We entered the manor unnoticed, save for the one ghoul who was currently being strangled to death by a boa constrictor that was provided by my lovely assistant. I looked down both sides of the hall that we entered through the window before turning on my heel and curb stomping the incapacitated ghoul. I didn't want to risk a boa in case the ghoul accidentally bit it. With a gracious look on its face, the boa merely stated, "Chimera," before it disappeared in a puff of smoke identical to the cloud that spawned it. Alexander turned towards the hall where the vampire was, according to Katsuya, sleeping or resting in the master bedroom. He looked at me and said, "I got he who is the filthiest one, you take care of the suffering ones." Though they are black sheep, they are also part of the shepherd's flock and must be cared for as such. Not getting the analogy, I merely nodded in response. With a smile, Anderson walked towards the vampire with a lax posture. I turned and sprinted forward, using the scent of decaying flesh to locate my prey. I opened the door of the first door on the left and discovered a group of ghouls all facing a corpse of a woman in the bathtub. I frowned as they clawed at the corpse before leaping toward them, bring my kunai to bear inches from the closest ghoul's bare neck. I hate planes. I hate flying too. Especially when I know my destination is an old, ghoul-ridden manor in the countryside of Ireland. Some may have a fear of heights, but if you ask me face to face, I'd say I have common sense. What idiot likes to be high enough from the planet that you're touching it would kill you? Sighing, I gave up one of my numerous speeches to the world about how things should be, to instead frowned at the soldiers assigned to watch Alucard and harass me. Well, that's what it seems like. Integra claimed they were here to help. Thought, I don't know how a fat idiot with a beret and a braided ponytail wearing gross Frenchman. I unbuckled from my seat and went to the bathroom to stretch my legs, doing my best to ignore the pig's squeals at seeing my behind. I dislike that idiot from Cheddar, but at least he doesn't look at me like a piece of meat, and the fact he killed that piece of shit priest helps too. I thought quietly with a frown, wondering where the black-eyed teen was. Integra said he was receiving treatment somewhere, but I doubt that's true. As I made my way back to my seat, I thought to myself, I'll definitely get Integra to tell me where he is when I get back, but until then, maybe Master will know. I kept walking past my seat into my master's personal cabin. He was seated in a chair similar to mine, except he had to arch his back to fit in the cramped compartment of the plane. I shut the door behind me. To stop those idiots from staring at my butt, I cleared my throat to get my master's attention. His crimson eyes opened and bored into me. He then made a smooth motion urging me to speak my piece while adjusting the brim of his hat, which rested on his lap, though his eyes weren't so courteous. Master, I was just thinking. I know Ms. Integra's your master and you follow her orders. But, do you think you could tell me where Kirisuto is? I said calmly, as I could be standing in a plane. My master merely adopted his usual debilitating smile and said, I don't know. My master only gives me direct orders. I don't care for politics, so I ignore her day-to-day activities that involve Her Majesty's cabinet. Although, I do wonder what Whiskers is up to. Perhaps he's rescuing a princess like a good little hero. Was all my master stated as I frowned at my master's answer. I think he'll turn up eventually. My master quickly added, trying to make me feel better, I guess. Thank you for your help, master. Also, would you mind if I stay in here with you? I don't like being in the animal cart, I asked with a hopeful expression. Alucard just nodded before returning to sleep as well. I sat in the seat on the row beside my master and I placed my head against the window, buckled myself in, then promptly fell asleep. My mind's eye wandered to the time my dad took me around the policy department and how excited he was when he made a breakthrough in a big case. That case. I felt eyes burn slightly and tears streak down my face in my sleep as we continued our way to Ireland. After touching down and taking the only car in kilometers that lacked rust, which just happened to be an Aston Martin by the way, we were dropped off by the two idiots. Exiting the vehicle, I gave the Mong duo the two-finger salute with a prompt, "Fuck you," to my master's amusement. Apparently, the idiots were heading back to England until we completed our mission. Seems like a waste of petrol to me, but I don't get a say in this, so I ignored them. My master kicked down the tall doors of the entrance, and upon entering he pointed down a corridor and wordlessly walked down the other with a feral grin. It took me a second to understand my master's intentions before I made my way down said corridor. I rounded every corner, hoping I wouldn't have to see any more mad gray flesh and sunken, glowing violet eyes, and my wish was half granted. When I came upon the next turn of the corridor, I heard the sound of rapid footsteps dancing around the next room. I brought my rifle to bear as I pivoted and unloaded a trio of rounds into the chest of three separate ghouls. As they collapsed, my enhanced eyes came upon Kirisuto and a girl around his age. Before I could state a word, I felt a quick, burning pain race up my chest and I started to choke violently. I looked down to see multiple knives as large as swords had impaled me from behind. I toppled forward only to be caught by Kirisuto and the girl. I frantically channeled medical chakra into my hands, giving them an ethereal green glow, as I pulled the daggers from Ceres's body. After Katsuya started channeling her own cruder version of the medical chakra and applied it to Ceres's throat, allowing her to breathe once more. My head turned to Ceres's assailant and said in a tone that resembled a growl more than voice, "She isn't like them, Alexander. She hasn't been a vampire for a full week yet." He looked at me with a stern expression. "I am sorry, Mr. Uzumaki, but I swore in front of the Lord that I would give up this flesh as a vessel for judgment, a vessel that can teach his word and vanquish his foes. I am part of the blade the Son of Man carries in his mouth to slay the beasts of evil, those that embody the stain which is Satan. I kill those that are evil to protect those that wish to love the Father." Alexander stated his testimony of faith while slowly approaching, bringing his bayonets to bear in the shape of a cross. I stood to my feet, ignoring the sting the silver left in my hands. "In my country your God is barely known, as well as his Son, but he has gained enough traction in foreign lands that his church has been listed among the most influential entities of the separatist nations, countries that rebelled against mine. I was taught about your ideology, though certain things may be different, and even an ignorant soldier such as I knows what your God loves more than anything, including his respect. Your God loves people who are just and kind. He disdains the corrupt and the cruel and is willing to forgive even the most grievous sins. Even if she is the embodiment of sin, your God still cares about her because she is good and will forgive her, right? She is still a teenager and hasn't been able to live. She doesn't deserve to die and was given a chance to live on the brink of death. Why wouldn't she take it?" I said in venomous tone. "I don't care if your God exists or not, he is of no use to a shinobi, but I hate when a person twists their beliefs to adhere to their own desires." Alexander's stern expression faded into a sincere smile. "Your words are true, as are your thoughts on my beliefs. Very well, I will spare the girl this time." Alexander started before pulling his hands toward his chest, causing all the bayonets to withdraw from Ceres's back at once. "But next time I won't have the bigger one to sat my oath." Alexander finished before throwing some of his blades in our direction. I placed a hand on Ceres and Katsuya's backs and pushed them to the floorboards, though considerate I soon discovered the notion was pointless when I looked up to see Integra standing calmly with a pair of soldiers at her side, as well as Alucard standing in front of her with his arm outstretched, impaled by Anderson's bayonets. Alexander frowned and opened a large, well-worn tome which released hundreds of pages filled with archaic seals. The pages began to surround Alexander in a vortex and glow. He turned to Integra and said, "Farewell, Sir Hellsing. I pray we shan't meet again soon and that you will keep your heresy within your own borders." Integra remained stone-faced and said, "I wish the same, Alexander Anderson. Give Maxwell my regards." Alexander grinned before turning to me and saying, "I do wish we meet again, Uzumaki. I see why you were named as such." My eyes widened. "You know what Kirisuto means?" The Iscariot priest started to disappear from the waist down. "A priest should know the name of his savior no matter the tongue," was all Alexander said. I felt the ghost of an amused smile grow on my face as I stated one word, "Sayonara." Alexander responded with a nod before disappearing completely. Since the priest was no longer a threat, I refocused my attention. Ceres. The majority of her chest was healed and only a couple of lacerations remained. Impatient with the fact that my chakra was regenerating at a sluggish pace, I channeled some of the Kyuubi's yoki, the monster equivalent of chakra, into Ceres's flesh to accelerate her own healing factor. The Hellsing affiliates watched intrigued, if not amazed, as Ceres's healed quicker than Alucard and the male teen's slate black eyes light up crimson with slitted irises that resembled Alucard's. Integra stepped forward, pointing her handgun towards me before asking, "You said you were human, but no human can set a person ablaze with a glance or heal a fatal wound by touching them. Even a sorcerer, so what are you?" My expression tightened to a deep frown. "I am human from a family that is cursed with pain, and because I have experienced that pain I can summon hellfire with my eyes. Also, while I have an advanced healing factor, this particular healing ability isn't my own. I was mortally wounded as a child, and to save my life a demon was melded into my soul at the expense of my father's life. I am not a demon but its container. I am a Jinchuriki, the power of human sacrifice." I explained as I lifted up the hem of my shirt to expose the Torii seal embroidered into my belly with my dad's blood before checking the now unconscious Ceres for signs of breathing, as she had no pulse. Integra's ever-present emotionless facade cracked and display a small smile for a second. "Well said, Jinchuriki. I was looking for you to inform you that we are no longer pursuing you with the intention of incarceration. I saw for myself that you are not threat but a vital, potential ally. With shame and my dignity on the line, I ask for your forgiveness. Was what Integra explained in a serious tone. Her request for forgiveness shattered all preconceptions of her and plans of action I thought up if we were to be attacked. I wasn't expecting her to be this strong, though technically my clan is noble. I was not raised as such and looked down upon nobles that were raised accordingly, but Integra isn't weak like they are. I nodded before motioning towards Miso and Katsuya. These two are Miso and Katsuya, respectively. Katsuya is a large serpent that can change into a human form and be summoned as long as manipulate chakra like I can. Miso is a demon fox that can change his size and has been combat trained. They will follow me under your orders, Sir Integra, I said as I rose to my full height with Katsuya to my right and Sarah's slung across my shoulders. She nodded at me and motioned me to follow her. Outside, a large black car was waiting for us. I assumed to return to the manor. I dismissed Miso and Katsuya to make room for everyone. I placed Sarah's in the window seat and sat beside her. Not trusting the strange-sounding soldiers of Hellsing to cut the shit. I sighed and let my body relax before drifting off to sleep. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.